Welcome back, my family. Before we dive into tonight's creepy little journey, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who loves a good scare before bed. I would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. So drop it down in the comments and hype me up a little on YouTube. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let us step into tonight's story.
I used to love thunderstorms. The sound of rain on the roof, the windows shaking a little, the low rumble rolling across the sky. It used to knock me right to sleep. I would crack my window just enough to smell the wet asphalt, kill the lights, and let the thunder be my white noise. But that was before. Before the night, a stranger used the storm to walk straight into my house while the power was out. I'm not talking about a ghost or a shadow in the corner of my eye. I mean a real man, breathing the same air as me, standing on the same floor, somewhere between my kitchen and my living room, while the only thing between us was a few inches of drywall and the sound of the rain. Back then, thunderstorms were my favorite excuse to stay in. I worked nights at a warehouse just off I-70, and on the drive home I would watch the clouds stack up over Columbus like big black mountains. If I saw lightning on the horizon, I would get kind of excited. It meant leftovers, video games, maybe a horror playlist on YouTube playing in the background, while the AC hummed and the fridge buzzed. That night started exactly like that. Same dead-end street, same little rented ranch house, same Ring doorbell at the front, and the same bad habit of tossing my keys on the counter and telling myself I would triple-check the locks later. I want you to picture where you are right now while you listen to this. Maybe you're in your car, rain on the windshield, wipers ticking back and forth. Maybe you're in bed, with your AC filling the room with that soft, mechanical hum. Maybe you're on your couch, lights off, kitchen glowing behind you, trusting those thin walls more than you should. Wherever you are, just remember one thing as you listen. The night this happened, I did everything almost right. I locked almost every door. I checked almost every window, and all it took was one storm, one stranger, and one tiny mistake to prove that almost is not enough. 1.1 Present-day confession. In a small apartment, I am writing this from a cheap fake wood kitchen table in a second-floor apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of table you buy because it is on sale and it kind of matches the cabinets, even though the laminate is already chipped at the corners. It is 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in August. The window unit AC under the balcony door has been humming on low for the past hour, rattling just enough to make the glass in the sliding door buzz. The fridge behind me cycles in and out with this dull, tired groan, like it is complaining every time the compressor kicks on. The only real light in the room is the bluish rectangle of my laptop screen, glowing on the surface of the table and turning my hands the same color as the cursor blinking at the bottom of this page. If I slide my eyes to the left, I can see a slice of the balcony rail through the glass. Rain is just starting to tap against it, light and uneven, like fingers drumming on metal. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, a car door slams and an engine turns over, then fades into the wet hiss of the main road. Above all of it, way out there past the streetlights and the apartment roofs, I can hear the sky clearing its throat. A low, distant rumble of thunder that you feel as much in your chest as in your ears. I am telling you all that so you understand something up front. Nothing special is happening right now. No flickering lights, no shadow at the end of the hall, no strange whispers on the line. It is just another late summer night in another small apartment in Ohio. In that very normal context, I am doing something that feels a little abnormal. I am writing this as if I am sending it to one of those horror channels on YouTube, the kind where you put on a video about true scary stories and let some stranger's voice carry you through other people's bad nights. That is who I am talking to in my head right now. Not the cops, not a therapist. You, whoever you are on the other side of the screen or the speakers. I am not asking you what I should do. I am not asking if you think what happened to me was paranormal or psychological, or if there is some rational explanation I have not thought of yet. I just want there to be a record of this somewhere. That is it. A record that, during one thunderstorm a couple of years ago, when I still lived alone in a single-story ranch house on a dead-end street off a little spur near I-70, something climbed inside the way I think about storms and locked itself there. Before that night, storms meant comfort. I worked nights back then, doing inventory in a warehouse off I-270. I would clock out around 11, drive home under a sky that looked like it had been spray-painted black, and feel this weird kind of peace when I saw flashes on the horizon. Other people white-knuckle the steering wheel when the rain starts to come down in sheets. Me? I would crack the window an inch so I could smell wet asphalt, let the wipers fight the water, and tell myself that as soon as I got home, I was not going anywhere until morning. My routine was simple: heat up whatever leftovers I had in the fridge, kick off my boots by the front mat, boot up the console, slide on my headset, and sink into a match or a horror playlist while the rain beat the roof like static. I loved the way thunder rolled over the house, low and heavy, like somebody dragging furniture around somewhere up in the clouds. It made the little place feel smaller, tighter, almost cozy. The sound of the AC moving air through the vents, the fridge quietly buzzing, the occasional click of the power strip by the TV, all of it blended into this soft, mechanical lullaby underneath the storm. If you have ever fallen asleep to the sound of a box fan, you know what I mean. Noise can feel like a blanket. After that night, I learned there is another side to that. That blanket can also smother the sounds you actually need to hear. Now, when thunder shakes the glass, it does not feel like a ceiling anymore. It feels like cover, like a big hand holding down the world so something else can move around without anyone noticing. There is something else I want you to understand before I get to the part you think you clicked for. It is about sound. Every building has this strange, tiny moment that most people never notice. The moment where everything lines up and stops. In this apartment, it usually happens somewhere between midnight and 1. The AC finishes a cycle and shuts off with a soft clunk. The fridge happens to be between hums. The upstairs neighbor has finally turned off their TV. No one is doing laundry. No one is walking down the hall. Even the faint, constant buzz of my power strip under the table seems to vanish for just a heartbeat. For maybe 1 second, 2 if I am unlucky, the world inside these walls goes quiet. Not less noisy, not sort of calm. I mean quiet in a way that makes your own breathing sound too loud. I did not used to notice that second. Now I feel it like a drop in an elevator. That is when I listen. Not because I want to, because I cannot help it. I listen for the wrong sound. Something that does not belong. Something under the storm or behind it. When I lived in that ranch house off the little spur near I-70, it had its own version of that second. The central AC would shut off. The old fridge in the corner of the kitchen would pause between cycles. The TV would be on mute or off. The Ring doorbell chime in the hall would be silent. Even the faint hum you get from cheap overhead lights would give out for just a breath. 1 second. No machines, no appliances. Just me and a box of wood and drywall sitting on a small lot at the end of a dead-end street while the sky pounded on the roof. On most nights, nothing happened in that second. It came and went, unnoticed. On one night, it did not. I am not going to tell you that I saw a shadow standing in that silence. I am not going to tell you that something whispered my name, or that a cabinet opened by itself, or that I woke up with scratches on my arms. What broke storms for me was not a ghost. It was a man. A man who knew I was there, alone, because I made the mistake of opening my mouth to a door. If you stay with me for the rest of this, I will tell you how a voice on the other side of my front door turned a thunderstorm from background noise into the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. And I will tell you why, even now, sitting in this too bright little apartment with my laptop humming and the AC working overtime, I still freeze and hold my breath every time the world goes silent for that one strange second in the middle of the night. 1.2. My life before the storm went wrong. Before all of this, my life was boring in the kind of way that makes you think bad things only happen to other people. The kind of boring where you move through the same streets, the same hours, the same aisles at the same supermarket, and you start to feel like nothing truly unexpected could ever punch through the routine. I was 29 when this happened. At the time, I worked night shift inventory in a warehouse wedged into one of those industrial parks just off the interstate. If you have ever driven past Columbus at night and seen long, low buildings lined up along the highway with their sodium lights glowing orange, you already know the view. My schedule was simple. Clock in at 3 p.m., clock out at 11 p.m. On overtime nights, I would stay until midnight or 1 in the morning, depending on how far behind we were. I spent most evenings walking cement floors with a scanner in my hand, counting boxes while forklifts beeped and backup alarms echoed between pallet racks. The soundtrack was always the same. Fans humming overhead, radios crackling at the loading docks, someone's Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock too quietly to really make out the words. Outside of that, I did not have much of a life. I had a few friends online that I gamed with almost every night. Voices more than faces. Guys named Tyler and Marco, and a handful of others whose real names I only half remembered. There was one co-worker I sometimes grabbed a drink with after a shift. A guy who liked to talk about moving to Florida but never actually did. For the most part, though, it was just me. Me, my job, and the little house I rented at the end of a cul-de-sac off a 2-lane road. The house itself was nothing special, but at the time it felt like an upgrade from the basement apartments I had lived in before. It was a small, single-story ranch set back from the street with just enough front yard to mow in 40 minutes. 1 floor, everything laid out in a line you could map in your head without trying. You stepped in through the front door straight into the living room. That was the main space, a sagging couch I got off Facebook Marketplace, a coffee table with a permanent ring from a can of beer, and a TV on a cheap stand with a power strip and a tangle of cables underneath. The living room flowed into a little open kitchen without any real wall between them, just a shift from carpet to laminate. There was a short hallway off the kitchen that led to the bedroom and the bathroom. On that same hallway, just before you got to the laundry nook, there was the back door. It was one of those cheap exterior doors with a small frosted glass panel near the top and a simple brass knob and deadbolt. On the other side of it was my narrow driveway and a small detached garage. A lopsided box of wood and metal that smelled like oil, wet cardboard, and old summer heat. The living room floor was this tired, grayish carpet that never looked clean no matter how many times I vacuumed it. The hallway and kitchen were covered in laminate that clicked faintly under your feet if you walked barefoot. The laundry nook, just big enough for an old washer and dryer facing each other, had chipped, cold tile that always felt a little damp. At the front of the house, next to the door, I had a Ring doorbell screwed into the siding. It came with the place. The landlord had bragged about it, like a video doorbell could make up for the peeling paint on the fence. Inside, a small white chime was plugged into an outlet in the hallway. When anyone pressed the button, it played this cheerful two-tone sound that echoed just enough around the little house to make the whole thing feel connected. Across the street lived Carl and Denise, an older couple who had probably seen every tenant that passed through that house. Carl always had a ball cap on, no matter the weather, and Denise liked to water her flowers in a pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. Their driveway held a bright red Ford pickup that looked like it had been washed twice a week for the last 10 years. They waved whenever they saw me come home, the way people in dead-end streets do, like they are constantly taking attendance. At the very end of the cul-de-sac, there was a house that had been vacant for months. The yard was overgrown, grass spilling over the cracked sidewalk, branches from an untrimmed tree scraping the roof whenever the wind picked up. Junk mail packed the mailbox so full that the lid no longer closed all the way. Sometimes at night, when I took the trash out, I would glance down that way and see nothing but a dark rectangle where the front door was, like a missing tooth in a row of otherwise normal smiles. Most of the other houses were lived in, but quiet. Shades pulled down tight once the sun went away. Porch lights with motion sensors that snapped on if a raccoon wandered too close to the trash cans. It was the sort of neighborhood where you recognized cars before you recognized faces. It was not perfect, but for a guy who worked nights and mostly wanted to be left alone, it worked. Thunderstorms were part of why I liked it. Growing up, my dad and I would sit on the covered porch of our old place whenever storms rolled in. He would bring out 2 metal lawn chairs and a couple of sodas, and we would watch the sky split itself open. Lightning would rip across the clouds and turn the whole street white for a heartbeat, and then the thunder would chase it, loud enough to rattle the windows. My mom hated it. She would stand in the doorway and tell us we were going to get struck by lightning, but she would be smiling when she said it. I learned to think of storms as something you watched, something you listened to, not something you hid from. As an adult, that never really changed. When the weather report called for severe thunderstorms, I took it as a sign to stay in and lean into my own routines. After a shift counting pallets and wrestling with inventory errors, I loved coming home, hearing the first drops on the roof, and knowing I was done for the night. I would throw my work clothes in the hamper, start the washer, and put on a long YouTube horror compilation, the exact kind of video you might be listening to this on, while I did dishes or folded laundry. Then I would switch over to games, headset on, couch slowly molding itself to my shape, the storm outside blending into the soundscape inside, the low, steady rumble of thunder, the constant hiss of rain, the vent's cool breath on my arms, the fridge's endless mutter in the kitchen. On nights when it rained too hard to see the end of the street, I felt safer somehow, like the world had shrunk to the size of my cul-de-sac, and my job was just to stay in my little box and ride it out. I should probably mention something else, since this is supposed to be an honest record. When it rained, especially when I came home juggling grocery bags or hauling in my work gear, I had a bad habit with that back door off the kitchen. I would shoulder it open, step inside dripping, try to swing it shut with my heel while I set everything down. Most nights, I told myself I would go back and double-check the latch after I got the bags on the counter. Most nights, I probably did. But there were definitely nights when I did not. Nights when the thunder was loud, and the AC was running, and the fridge was humming, and the ring chime was quiet, and the only thing between the driveway and my living room was a cheap door I had pushed, almost closed. 1.3, the news alert and the early ride home. The day everything went wrong did not start out feeling any different. If anything, it felt easier than most. By late afternoon, the warehouse was already buzzing about the weather. We had all seen the radar snapshots on our phones, big blobs of red and orange creeping across the state like someone had spilled paint on Ohio, and it was slowly sliding our way. Around 5 o'clock, the old PA system in the ceiling crackled to life. The speaker nearest my aisle hissed like a snake warming up. Then our supervisor's voice came through, flattened and tinny. Just a heads up, folks. We've got a severe thunderstorm warning for the county and a possible tornado watch until later tonight. Stay inside on breaks. Don't be hanging out by the bay doors. You know the drill. Someone on a forklift down the lane let out a dramatic groan. A couple guys near me started making the usual jokes. Ohio weather, man. It's either nothing or the apocalypse, no in between. So we're still working through the apocalypse, right? Just checking. There was a ripple of laughter, and then the sounds of the building swallowed it. Forklift beeps backing up, pallet wrap crinkling as someone tied off a load, overhead fans humming over our heads like giant, irritated flies. I kept scanning barcodes and trying not to think about driving home and whatever that red blob on the radar was going to turn into. Every now and then, the big bay doors at the end of the aisle shook when a gust hit them just right, making this hollow, booming noise that you felt in your feet. The fluorescent lights flickered once, just a little dim and bright again, and everyone paused in that same shared held breath before going right back to work. By 7, the sky outside the grimy high windows had turned the heavy kind of gray that means the sun is still technically up somewhere, but it does not matter. The rain started as a soft hiss on the roof. By 8, you could hear it even over the fans and the alarms. Every time someone opened a side door, the sound grew for a second, like opening an oven but with cold air and water instead of heat. A little after 8:30, the PA crackled again. Same hiss, same voice, but this time there was something like relief underneath it. All right, listen up. Due to the weather, trucks are held back on the interstate. We're not getting anything else in tonight. Night shift can wrap up and clock out by 9:30. Don't hang around in the lot. Get home safe. There was actual cheering that time. Someone whistled. A pallet jack clanged as it was abandoned in celebration. For me, the first thought was simple. Home early. Storm night. Extra time to do nothing but sit on my couch and let the world beat itself to death outside while I played games and pretended it was not real. By 9:20, I had my scanner turned in and my locker open. I pulled on my hoodie, slung my work bag over my shoulder, and stepped out into the small employee lot at the side of the building. The sky was already working itself up. The rain came in slanting lines under the yellow parking lot lights, stinging my face as I jogged across the cracked asphalt toward my car. The wind had a bite to it, even in August, the kind that grabs at your clothes and makes you feel suddenly lighter on your feet, like you could be picked up a few inches without warning. Lightning stitched through the clouds over the interstate, and a few seconds later, the thunder rolled over the flat industrial park, like a semi passing too close. Inside the car, the world shrank down again. I shut the door, and for a second, there was just the drum of rain on the roof and the windshield, loud and messy and oddly comforting. I started the engine, and the dash lights flared bright in the dim cabin. The radio came on mid-song, some overplayed track I did not care about. I turned the volume down a little and sat there, letting the AC blow damp, cold air into my face. As I pulled out of the lot, the rain thickened. The wipers squeaked across the glass, fought back, then squeaked again. Headlights from other cars smeared into long white streaks, and the taillights glowed red and bloomed wider, like someone had smudged them with a thumb. I merged from the industrial park access road onto the main drag. On either side, the kind of places that look the same in every city ticked past. Gas stations with ghostly fluorescent canopies, a strip mall with half its neon letters burned out, a chain pharmacy with its sign reflecting in puddles across the lot. As I was passing the second gas station, the music on the radio cut out mid-verse. It was replaced by that sharp, synthetic weather alert tone, the one that drills right through whatever you are doing and climbs into your spine. 3 long beeps. Then a flat, disembodied voice read off counties and warnings in a dead monotone. Severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect for Franklin County. Potential for damaging winds and large hail. Tornado watch in effect until... I turned the volume down even further, but the echo of that tone hung around in my head. Outside, the rain intensified, a hard, rattling barrage on the roof. The wipers could barely keep up. The farther I drove from the commercial strip, the darker it got. Streetlights thinned out. The glare of big store signage faded in the rear view, replaced by clusters of smaller lights where residential streets branched off. Trees leaned into the road from either side, the branches tossing under the wind like they were trying to shake something off. My route home was muscle memory at that point. Off the main road, down a quieter 2-lane, past a church with a cracked white steeple, then into the side road that led toward my cul-de-sac. The houses there did not have the uniform look of a new development. More like someone had built them one at a time, each with its own slight personality. Porch lights glowed yellow in the rain, reflecting on wet driveways. As I turned onto my street, I noticed the car. It was just a shape at first. A dark sedan parked along the curb on the right side, about halfway down the block. No lights on. No one getting in or out. Not even the dull red of brake lights fading. It is not illegal to park there, but people almost never did. The houses all had driveways, and residents liked to keep the street itself clear. For a split second, I felt a small, automatic prickle at the back of my neck. The feeling you get when something is just barely out of place in a familiar picture. Then I told myself what anyone would tell themselves. Someone has a guest over. One of the families has too many cars to fit in the driveway. Maybe a neighbor's kid came home for the weekend with a new used car and parked on the street to show it off. The dark slab of it slid past my passenger window as I drove by. For half a heartbeat, I thought I saw the faintest glimmer of something at the front. Parking lights, maybe. But the rain made everything shimmer and double. The engine sounded like it might be idling, this low, steady vibration under the rain. But again, I did not trust my ears. The storm was throwing sound around in weird ways. My own driveway came up on the left. I turned in, tires hissing over water, and pulled up beside my small, shadowy garage. The house sat in front of me, squat and dark except for the glow of the porch light and the little blue ring around the doorbell button. When I killed the engine, the car ticked as it cooled. Small metal pops under the fading roar of the rain. For a moment, I just sat there, hands still on the wheel, watching the wipers stop mid-arc and listening to thunder roll through somewhere above the low roofs of the neighborhood. That was the last time I thought of that car as just another parked car. Later, when all of this was over and the officers were standing in my living room with water drying on their boots, one of them would flip open his notebook and ask me a very specific question about that night. He would say, Do you remember if its parking lights were on or off when you got out of your own car? And I would have to admit that I was not sure. Only that by the time I truly started paying attention, it was already too late. 2.1. Cozy routine under flickering lights. When I think back to that night, there is a part of me that still wants to freeze it at the moment I walked through the back door. If I could keep it there, loop it forever, it would just be another shift, another storm, another lazy night where nothing truly bad happens. I pulled into the driveway, trying to line my headlights up so they did not blast into Carl and Denise's living room. Rain smeared across the windshield in fat, slanting lines, and the garage stood off to the side like a bigger, darker shadow. The porch light at the front of the house threw a little pool of yellow onto the wet concrete steps. But from where I parked, the back door was closer. I killed the engine and sat for a second, listening to the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal and the soft roar of the storm pressing down on the car. When I opened the door, wind shoved a sheet of rain sideways into me, soaking the front of my hoodie in 3 seconds flat. I cursed under my breath, grabbed my work bag and the plastic container of half-eaten pasta I had brought home, and shut the door with my hip. The walk from the driveway to the back door was only a few steps, but my socks were already damp through my boots by the time I got there. I fumbled with the keys, the metal cold and slippery in my hand, and finally got the deadbolt turned. I should have stopped, stepped in, and closed the door carefully behind me. Instead, I did what I did on 100 other nights. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, stepped inside, and let it start to swing closed on its own as I moved forward. The warm, dry air of the house wrapped around me. I dropped my keys on the counter with a familiar clack and set the plastic container down beside them. My foot came back automatically, catching the edge of the door and giving it a lazy shove. It thudded against the frame. Did the latch catch? Maybe. My brain registered the sound as door closed and filed it away under things taken care of without double-checking. The kitchen greeted me the way it always did at that hour. A little stale, a little tired. The smell of old coffee grounds in the sink mixed with something like reheated pizza that had never fully left the air. The overhead light hummed faintly, casting a slightly yellow tone over everything. I toed off my steel-toe work boots on the mat by the back door, the soles making a wet squeak against the tile. My socks were damp and clung to my feet, and I peeled them off one at a time, tossing them into the little laundry basket wedged in the corner by the washer. From the living room, I could hear the AC moving air through the vents overhead, a steady, low rush that smoothed out the sharper sounds of the storm. The fridge behind me hummed in that tired way old appliances do, like it resented every second it had to keep working. Somewhere out there, thunder rumbled, but in here it came through the walls muted and distant, like someone rolling a heavy cart down a hallway 2 floors up. The cheap ceiling fan in the living room creaked as it turned. It had a tiny wobble to it that made one of the blades dip lower with each rotation, just enough to click the air a little louder once every few seconds. I had meant to fix it or turn it off a dozen times, but I had gotten used to its uneven rhythm. It was part of the house's heartbeat. I dropped my work bag by the side of the couch and headed down the short hall to my bedroom. I flicked on the light there, squinting a little as my eyes adjusted from the softer kitchen glow. The room looked exactly as I had left it that morning. Unmade bed, hoodie thrown over the back of the chair, one dresser drawer half open because I never learned to close things properly. I stripped out of my work clothes, shaking dust and lint onto the carpet, and grabbed a pair of basketball shorts and an old faded hoodie from the dresser. The hoodie used to be black, but had been washed into a kind of charcoal gray, with cracking white letters from a college I never actually attended. Pulling it on felt like stepping into the version of myself that existed only at home. Off duty, off clock, unobserved. The damp socks went into the hamper with a wet thud. For a second, I could feel the chill of the storm still clinging to my skin, but the regular dry warmth of the house was already working on it. Back in the kitchen, I popped the lid off the plastic container of pasta and dumped it onto a plate. The noodles stuck together in a sad little brick. I shoved the plate into the microwave and hit the button without really looking. The microwave began its familiar harsh buzz, a sound that always felt a little too loud for the size of the room. The turntable inside squeaked on its track as it rotated the food in slow circles. I leaned on the counter, watching the numbers count down on the small green display, listening to the house breathe around me. Buzz from the microwave, hum from the fridge, rush from the vents, click, creak from the ceiling fan in the next room. Outside, lightning flashed, thin white forks sneaking through the gaps in the blinds over the sink window. A second later, the thunder chased it, closer this time, sharp enough that the window glass gave a tiny, complaining rattle in its frame. For half a second, the kitchen light seemed to dim. Just a blink, really, like the house was rolling its eyes. Then it came back full strength, and the microwave kept grinding away like nothing had happened. "Nice try," I muttered at the ceiling. "If I drop mid-match, I'm blaming you." The microwave beeped 3 times, each sharp tone cutting across the other sounds. I cracked the door open, and a wave of hot, damp steam rushed out, smelling like tomato sauce and freezer burn. I grabbed the plate with my fingertips, shuffling it from one hand to the other as I carried it into the living room. The living room light was on, but I reached for the lamp beside the couch instead and clicked it on. The standing lamp had a softer shade, and it painted the room in a warmer, more forgiving glow. The TV sat dark on its stand, my console tucked beneath it with its little power light off like a sleeping eye. I set the plate down on the coffee table and dropped onto the couch. The cushions sighed under me. They had molded to my weight over time so that I sank into the same groove every night. I picked up the controller, pressed the button, and waited for that quiet little beep and the whir of fans as the console woke up. The TV screen flashed blue, then showed the manufacturer's logo before resolving into the home menu. Habit took over. I opened the party chat and saw Tyler and Marco already online, their gamer tags glowing. I put on my headset, adjusting the cups around my ears until they sat just right, and their voices poured in mid-argument about something stupid, lag or loadouts, or who owed who a rematch. "Finally," Tyler said. "Thought the storm took you out." "Not yet," I replied, balancing the plate of pasta on my knees. "If I drop mid-match, blame Ohio's power grid, not my skill." Marco snorted. "You don't need help blaming your skill, man." Outside, the storm answered with another flash. The slats of the blinds lit up white, then went dark. The thunder came quicker this time, a short, cracking boom that made the floor tremble faintly under my feet. Somewhere in the house, the central AC clicked as it kicked into a higher setting. Cool air pushed harder through the vents, changing its note a little. The ceiling fan above me wobbled and creaked, its chain swaying. The living room lights flickered once, just enough for Tyler to go, "Yo, what was that?" in my ear, and for me to glance up at the fixture. The light steadied. The TV remained solid. "Grid's drunk," I said, forcing a laugh. "Let's run one before it passes out." It was a normal night. A good night even by my old standards. Pizza, friends' voices in my ears, storm outside doing its thing, my house wrapped around me like a shell, If you paused it there, right at the moment I joined their lobby, fork in one hand and controller in the other, you would never guess how much damage I was about to do to myself with just 3 stupid words spoken at the wrong door. 2.2. The first doorbell ring. The match we dropped into was the kind that eats time without you noticing. Bright digital chaos on the screen, my squad sprinting down some fake ruined street, explosions popping in the distance like fireworks. My headset wrapped the whole world down into 2 things: the game and my friends' voices. Tyler was doing what he always did, yelling call-outs like we were in an actual war, not sitting in dark rooms with snacks. Left side, he's pushing you, watch that corner! Marco was already complaining about lag, every other sentence ending in a curse. Bro, I swear, this server's trash. I'm shooting ghosts out here. Gunshots rattled in my ears, footsteps pounded on virtual pavement. Somewhere in the mess of sound, thunder outside the real house blended so well with the in-game explosions that I stopped noticing which was which. The controller vibrated in my hands. My half-eaten pasta sat cooling on the table, forgotten. I was pinned in a doorway in-game, watching a choke point, listening hard for the faint audio cues that meant someone was sneaking up on us. My focus funneled down to the crosshair and the sound of my own breathing in the headset mic. And then, cutting across all of that, I heard it. Not a shot, not a grenade, not Tyler, not Marco. The clear, soft ding of my ring chime plugged into the hallway outlet. Just 2 notes, rising and falling, gentle and familiar. A sound that belonged to daylight and packages. To boring Tuesday afternoons when some driver in a reflective vest left a box of cleaning supplies on my porch. In the middle of digital war and real thunder, that tiny, cheerful chime might as well have been a scream. For a second, nothing in my body moved. My brain tried to file it under background noise and keep my thumbs working the sticks, but it would not fit. It's 10:30, a smaller, more stubborn voice said inside my head. Nobody delivers this late. I ran through the checklist without meaning to. I had not ordered food. I had not scheduled a pickup. I was not expecting anyone. My stomach tightened in this small, mean way, like it wanted to fold in on itself. I could still hear the afterimage of the chime in my head, those 2 notes hanging there. Yo, push right with me, Tyler shouted in my ear. Come on, come on! I'm here, I muttered. But my eyes were already flicking away from the screen toward the dark rectangle of the hallway. Rational brain stepped in, trying to smooth the edges. Carl and Denise, maybe. They might need something. Maybe they lost power and wanted to know if mine was still on. Maybe a neighbor was going door to door telling people about a downed line or a tree in the road. Storm nights make people knock, I told myself. That is all. Another chime would have frozen me. Another sound, a knock, anything. But the house went right back to its previous soundtrack. Game noise, AC, storm. I think someone's at my door, I said into the mic. Marco groaned. Here we go. Man's about to DC. Bro, don't you dare drop mid-match, Tyler said. You better not leave me with this lag. Their voices and the gunfire felt suddenly far away, like I was hearing them through a tunnel. I'm just muting a sec, I told them. Keep going. I thumbed the mute button on my headset. Their chatter cut off mid-complaint. The game kept going, gunfire and explosions still crackling in my ears. But it all felt distant now, like bad music bleeding in from a neighboring apartment. I set the controller down on the coffee table and stood up. The couch cushions sighed as they released my weight. For a heartbeat, I considered just ignoring it, letting whoever was out there ring again or walk away, pretending I had not heard. But curiosity has teeth. I stepped out of the living room and into the hallway. The sound of the game dulled behind me with every step, swallowed by the soft, deeper sounds of the house. The difference hit me in layers. The steady blow of the AC through the vents overhead, the distant hum of the fridge back in the kitchen, the rain pattering on the roof and against the front windows, softer here than in the car, but still insistent. The hallway was a narrow, slightly darker tunnel of beige walls and framed photos I barely looked at anymore. The small white chime unit was plugged halfway down on the left, its little LED dark. It looked innocent, useless. I walked past it and stopped a couple of feet from the front door. The door was solid wood with a peephole at eye level. Beyond it, I knew, was the small covered porch, 2 concrete steps, and then the front yard sloping down to the street. The porch light glowed through the thin line at the bottom of the door, cutting a narrow strip of pale yellow across the entryway floor. I did not touch the doorknob. Not yet. I just stood there, breathing a little harder than I wanted to admit. Listening, the storm filled the silence on the other side. Rain hitting the steps, wind pushing at something plastic in the yard, the occasional low roll of thunder further off. I thought I heard, once, the faint hiss of tires on wet asphalt as a car moved through the neighborhood, but it faded quickly. No footsteps, no knocking, no second chime. For a moment, I thought about pulling my phone out of my hoodie pocket, opening the Ring app, and checking the live view. That is what the commercials show you doing. Tap, instant clarity. I actually had the phone halfway out before I noticed the router light through the doorway to the living room. It was blinking a dull, angry red. The Wi-Fi had been struggling all night with the storm, dropping in tiny hiccups that we joked about as Ohio servers. The Ring had already gone offline once or twice in the last month whenever there was lightning nearby. I pictured myself standing there with the app spinning, giving me nothing but a buffering circle while someone was right on the other side of the wood. The thought made my skin crawl. There was a version of the story where I turned around and went back to the couch, told myself it was a false chime, a glitch, whatever. That is not the version I am living in. Instead of staying quiet, instead of pretending I was not home, I opened my stupid mouth. I swallowed, looked at the door like it could look back, and said, "Yeah? Who is it?" My voice sounded different in the narrow entryway. It bounced off the walls and came back to me a little warped, a little unsure, like I was hearing someone else speak. For a split second after the words left my mouth, I wanted to reach out and grab them, shove them back in. The moment they hit the wood, I felt it. The raw, exposed vulnerability of that simple sentence hanging there between me and whoever stood inches away on the other side. Out on the porch, the rain kept falling. Thunder grumbled, closer now. Water dripped steadily from the gutter onto the concrete steps. Inside, in that brief pause after my question, it was quiet enough in the little house that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I did not know it yet, but those 4 words were the most dangerous thing I did all night. 2.3. The voice at the door. There was a beat of silence after my words, just long enough for me to start hoping no one was actually there. Then he answered. The voice was right on the other side of the wood, not shouting, not muffled by distance, like he was standing with his mouth a foot from the door. "Hey man," he said, easy, almost friendly. "My car died out here. I just need to use your phone real quick." If you have ever had a moment where your body reacts before your brain can spin a story around it, you know the feeling I had then. Something in me tightened, hard, like a knot pulling itself tight in my stomach and chest. It was the way he said, "Hey man." It was too casual, too familiar. Like we were already on the same level, like we were co-workers or buddies, not a stranger and a guy standing in his house in bare feet. There was no sir, no slight polite distance, just, "Hey man." My car died out here. Every word felt like it had been picked from a script people used for decades, back when that line made sense. Back before everyone and their grandmother had a phone in their pocket. Behind the door, behind my ribs, my heart was beating hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. In the space it took him to finish that sentence, my brain tried to play catch-up. Everyone has a cell phone now. If his car died, why not call from there? Why pick my house on a dead-end street instead of one closer to the main road, with better lighting and more traffic? Also, why my front door, when there were 3 other houses closer to the mouth of the cul-de-sac that he would have passed first? I thought about news stories I half remembered, headlines about people forced into houses at gunpoint because they opened the door for someone just needing to use the phone. Stories where the quotes always sounded so reasonable afterward. He was saying all the right things on paper, but something under the words was wrong. I did not respond. I stood there in the entryway, a couple of feet back from the door, hands hanging useless at my sides, and I did not say anything. My throat felt dry. Like if I tried to speak again, nothing would come out. On the other side, the man shifted his weight. I could hear the creak of the porch boards under his shoes, faint but clear under the storm. Rain was pounding on the concrete steps and drumming on the overhang above him, a steady roar that should have swallowed his voice, but it did not. A few seconds stretched. It could have been 3, could have been 10. My whole focus narrowed to the thickness of the door between us, the grain of the wood, the little strip of light at the bottom. "Hello?" he said. The tone had changed. Not angry, just flatter, less friendly. "I know you're there, man. I heard you." That line slid straight under my skin and hooked into something soft. I heard you. It was true, of course. He had heard me. I had answered him. I had put my voice out there like bait on a string. But hearing him say it out loud like that, calm and plain, made the hallway tilt under me. He was not knocking to find out if anyone was home. He had knocked because he already assumed someone was. "I heard you." The words pinched shut around that one, forming a little knot that is never really untied. My first instinct was to fill the silence with something, anything. "Sorry, I can't help. I already called someone for you. I'm on the phone with the police." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. My own heartbeat was too loud, rushing in my ears like the storm. He did not try the handle. He did not pound on the wood. He did not beg or threaten or wheedle. Instead, a second later, the doorbell rang again. That same soft, pleasant two-tone chime from the hallway unit behind me. Its little song floated through the entryway, too cheerful for the weight in my chest. It felt obscene, like clown music at a funeral. I stared at the door as if I could see through it. The storm filled in the edges, rain hitting the porch roof, splashing in gutters, the distant growl of thunder rolling over the neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, a car moved through the wet, tires hissing on asphalt. Inside, the house felt suddenly too small. The air tasted stale. My knees locked. No more voice, no more knocking, just the memory of that second chime, hanging there. I do not know how long I stood there. I told myself I would give it a minute, let him go away, and check the peephole. But time got strange, My sense of it stretched and thinned like taffy. Finally, when my fingers started to go numb and my legs ached from standing so rigid, I forced myself to move. I took one slow step forward. My socked feet made no sound on the entryway floor. I put my eye to the peephole. The fisheye glass warped everything, bending the world outside into a soft, bulging circle. The porch light was on, making the small concrete square glow pale against the dark. Rain fell in shimmering lines, sheeting down just beyond the overhang. There was no one there. No figure, no shadow, no shape leaning just out of view. Just the empty steps and the hazy suggestion of the front yard beyond, blurred by water and the curve of the lens. I held my eye there until it hurt, and the circle started to pulse with my own heartbeat. Still nothing. I let out a breath I had been holding so long it trembled on the way out. The high in my chest dropped half an inch. Maybe he had left. Maybe he was exactly what he said he was. Some guy with a dead car who decided to move on when no one answered properly. The thought did not convince my body, but it gave my brain something to grip. I stepped back from the door, wiped my hand down the front of my hoodie without realizing I had been clenching it into a fist. The living room light spilled soft yellow down the hall, and the muffled sounds of the game bled through. Gunfire, footsteps, Tyler's voice cutting in and out in my headset lying on the couch. I walked back toward that familiar noise like I was crawling out of deep water. By the time I picked up the controller and slid the headset over my ears again, my friends were mid-match. "Dude, where'd you go?" Tyler demanded as soon as I unmuted. "We're getting wrecked out here." Yeah, Marco chimed in. "He probably went to microwave more pasta." I sank into the couch and forced a shaky laugh. "Some guy just rang my bell," I said. "Said his car died out front. Wanted to use my phone." There was a pause on the line. Then Tyler swore, the kind of sharp, simple curse that comes from the gut. "Yeah, don't be dumb," he said. "Do not open that door. Ever heard of literally any true crime podcast?" Marco tried to turn it into a joke. "Next video we listen to is gonna be about you if you start letting strangers in during a storm, bro." I told them I had not opened it, that I had said something and then waited, and the guy seemed to have left. The sound of their voices, their irritation and half-serious concern smoothed me out a little. The controller felt normal in my hands again. The game gave me something else to look at, something else to react to. But some part of my attention stayed hooked on the door, on the sound of that chime ringing twice. A little later, 15 minutes, maybe 20, during a lull between matches, I did what anyone would do with a video doorbell and a bad feeling. I pulled out my phone, opened the Ring app, and went to the history. If you have one of those things, you know the screen I mean. A list of motion events and rings, little thumbnails showing people leaving packages, neighbors walking dogs, me coming and going. I scrolled down to the most recent entry. There should have been a clip labeled Ring at the exact time I heard the chime. Instead, there was a red banner across the top of the app. No video, device offline since 10:31 p.m. The timeline under it was empty. A flat line where my paranoia wanted a little rectangle with a stranger's face on it. I blinked at the error message, frowning. 10:31 p.m. My mind snapped back to the moment earlier when the kitchen light dimmed and the storm growled over the house hard enough to make the windows quiver. It was right around then, I realized, that the Ring must have dropped off the network. No power to the chime, no Wi-Fi connection, and yet I had heard it. Twice. No recording. No thumbnail, no pixelated stranger standing on my porch under the yellow light. Nothing to prove that anyone had been there at all, except the way my heart still sped up when I replayed his voice in my head. "Hey man, my car died out here. I know you're there, man. I heard you." The game loaded another map in front of me. Tyler's voice filled my ears with plans for the next round, Marco groaning about ping. The storm outside kept beating against the house, and somewhere between all of that noise, I realized how easy it is for something to slip into your life in the spaces your cameras and your common sense do not quite cover. 3, 1. Blackout and phone light. For a little while after I checked the app and saw that red device offline message, I did what people always do when they feel something they cannot explain. I buried it under noise. We dropped into another match. Tyler was still amped up, swearing at random players. Marco found a new reason to complain about his ping. I told myself, very firmly, that I was being dramatic. The storm was messing with the Wi-Fi. The ring going down at the same time as the kitchen light flicker was just bad timing. The man at the door? He had probably gotten back into whatever car he was talking about and left. I kept saying those things in my head until the words went dull and thin. In the game, we were pushing up some narrow alley. Digital footsteps thudded in my ears. My thumb tapped the stick. My trigger finger flexed, muscle memory doing its job. The storm outside had become a kind of background roar. I barely registered the flashes through the blinds anymore. They might as well have been part of the graphics on screen. I was just starting to forget about the door, about the voice, about the way he said, "I heard you," when the storm decided it was done playing around. There was a flash. If you have ever been close to lightning, you know the kind I mean. Not a distant, flickering glow. This was a white-hot sheet of light that burned through the blinds and lit the whole living room up for a split second, turning every object into a sharp, overexposed cutout. In that same instant, thunder hit. There was no polite delay, no counting 1, 2, 3 in your head. Just light, then a crack so loud it felt like someone had dropped something massive directly onto the roof of the house. The walls seemed to flex with it. My chest did too. And then everything died. The TV went black mid-frame. 1 second, I was staring down a digital sight. The next, I was looking at my own faint reflection on a dark glass rectangle. The console made a tiny, pathetic click, like a throat clearing and then deciding not to speak. The small power light winked out. The controller in my hands stopped vibrating and went limp. Overhead, the steady rush of the AC cut off with a hollow thunk, leaving a weird, pressureless feeling in the room. The ceiling fan above me slowed, its creaking rhythm tapering off as the blades turned lazily, then stopped. Even the hum of the power strip under the TV stand vanished. For a fraction of a second, it was as if someone had hit mute on the entire house. The only sound that persisted, cutting clean through the sudden vacuum, was the storm. Rain hammered the roof with twice the force I had noticed a minute before. It hit the siding in sheets and bounced off the concrete outside in messy splashes. Wind shoved at the windows hard enough to make a few of them give a little, the glass squeaking slightly in their frames. In the distance, far past my own street, I thought I heard sirens, thin, rising notes weaving in and out between the crashes of thunder. It was hard to tell if they were real or if the storm was just making up its own song. "Shit," I said quietly into the dark. The word sounded smaller without the TV noise to carry it. It fell flat against the walls and dropped, like the air was too thick to hold it. My hands tightened around the useless controller before I realized I was still holding it. I set it down on the coffee table, the plastic clacking against the wood. Habit made me glance over at the router in the corner, even though I already knew what I was going to see. The little tower of lights was completely dead. No green, no red, nothing. From the kitchen, the digital clock on the stove that usually glowed blue in the darkness had gone blank. It was like someone had plucked the electricity out of the whole block with 2 fingers. I reached for my phone. It was on the cushion next to me, face down. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen, stupidly expecting it to stay dark in solidarity with the rest of the house. The display lit up as soon as I touched it, bright and too white, making me squint. My home screen looked almost alien, floating in the gloom. A tiny square of normal life in a room that no longer felt like mine. The percentage in the corner said 63%. Enough. I flicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark in a narrow cone, turning dust motes in the air into tiny, drifting ghosts. The living room looked wrong. Shadows pooled in the corners in a way they never did when the overhead light or the lamp was on. The familiar edges of the couch, the coffee table, the TV stand all looked sharper, but at the same time less solid, like they had been cut out and placed on a different background. The ceiling seemed higher. The hallway seemed longer and narrower, the darkness at its end heavier. The vanilla smell from the candle I had not yet lit, that I would later light, was not there yet. Instead, there was the faint odor of warm electronics cooling down, the ghost of reheated pasta, and the dampness the storm pressed into the walls. Another gust of wind hit the side of the house. The front windows creaked again, a tired, complaining sound. Rain pelted the glass and siding in uneven bursts. Somewhere far off, a siren wound up and then down, like someone drawing a line in the air and erasing it. I stood up slowly, phone in hand, trying to let the part of me that understood electricity get a word in before the part that remembered the voice at the door took over. Power outages are normal in storms. Lines come down, transformers blow, grids get overloaded. I told myself that out loud, not in so many words, but in a mutter that amounted to the same thing. This happens, I said to nobody. Storm, that's all. The rational voice in my head grabbed onto that and ran with it. Okay, the power's out. So what? You have your phone. You have data, at least for a little while. You have candles in the kitchen drawer next to the spare batteries and the takeout menus. People make this into a game all the time. Camping night at home. I pictured it like a little plan written on a whiteboard. Grab candle. Light it. Turn the storm into background ambiance. Play something dumb on my phone until the lights came back. Maybe text Tyler and Marco to tell them my grid finally gave up. There was comfort in that simple sequence. It made the dark feel less like an enemy and more like a problem with steps you could work through. For a few seconds, I let myself believe that was all this was. I swept the flashlight beam around the room one more time. The couch was still a couch. The TV was still a TV. The window blinds were still just plastic slats, trembling slightly when the wind came hard enough. No faces in the glass, no figures in the reflection. Just me in my empty living room and a storm that had gotten a little louder. The house creaked as it settled under another gust. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon in the sink shifted with a tiny clink, like something had nudged it. I told myself it was the vibration from the thunder. I tightened my grip on the phone, took a breath that still felt fairly normal, and started toward the kitchen drawer where I kept the matches and the candle I always joked I only owned in case the power company decided to play games. In another story, maybe that is where it would have ended. Me in a dark house with a candle, scrolling my phone, waiting for the lights to flick back on. In this one, The power going out did not make the house empty. It just made it easier for other sounds to be heard. 3, 2. The open space behind the house. The beam from my phone felt almost too bright as I moved through the living room, like it was exposing more than it was supposed to. Every familiar object looked just slightly wrong in the moving cone of light. The couch, the TV stand, the pile of shoes by the door, like props on an empty stage after everyone has gone home. The short hallway connecting the living room to the kitchen yawned ahead of me, darker than it ever seemed with the power on. I stepped into it, my bare feet whispering over the laminate. On the right was the little laundry nook, just a recessed space big enough for the old washer and dryer to face each other with a shelf squeezed in above them. The washer's lid was closed. A roll of paper towels sat crooked on the shelf, and a half-empty bottle of detergent leaned against a box of dryer sheets. In the flashlight beam, the metal tops of the machines shone dully, their edges too sharp, the shadows underneath them too black. Past the laundry nook was the door to the detached garage. It was a plain, hollow-core interior door with a simple lock and knob. I could see a thin line of darker shadow beneath it where the garage began, the gap just big enough for a draft to sneak under if the weather was bad. Tonight, the air at my ankles felt cooler as I passed, like the garage was a mouth breathing out. On the left, opposite the garage door, was the back door, the one I had shouldered open coming in, the one I had half-kicked shut without thinking. Its outline loomed at the end of that side of the hall, a tall, narrow rectangle in the dark with the faint suggestion of the small, frosted glass panel near the top. I did not go to it yet. Instead, I kept walking until the hallway opened into the kitchen, and the sense of being inside a tunnel eased up a little. The kitchen window over the sink was covered by cheap, white, slatted blinds. I had never bothered to upgrade them. They came with the house, and like a lot of things there, they were good enough as long as you did not expect much. I angled my phone so the light fell away from the window, not onto it. I did not want to see my own face staring back at me, washed out and distorted in the glass. I wanted to see what was outside. Through the gaps between the slats, I could make out the weakest suggestion of the world beyond. The driveway was a darker strip against the slightly lighter lawn, the wet asphalt turning what little ambient light there was into a vague gloss. The neighboring roofs rose up as deformed triangles against the low, churning sky. The storm turned everything into silhouettes and smears. For a moment, nothing moved. Then lightning flashed again, closer this time. The world outside the window blew open like a negative in a dark room. In that flicker, the driveway snapped into sharp detail. The wet sheen, the small puddles forming in the dips, the darker rectangle of my car parked closest to the garage. The wooden fence along the property line stood out, every soaked board distinct. The side wall of Carl and Denise's house across the way showed plain as day, raindrops bouncing off their own driveway. No figures, no shapes, just rain, fences, roofs. The thunder that followed rolled over the house almost instantly, a deep, rolling blast that made the cabinets around me rattle faintly. The blinds clicked against the window as the wind shoved at the glass. I realized I was holding my breath and let it out slowly. For years, one of the reasons I liked this place was the way it sat on the lot. My bedroom window faced the quiet street, where porch lights and the occasional passing car made the night feel watched, but not invasive. The back of the house, the part I was standing in now, faced a more private strip. Driveway, garage, then the backs of other houses whose windows did not look directly into mine. I had always told myself that was safer. No one looking in at me. Less chance of being stared at from the sidewalk. Standing there with the power out, with only my phone and the storm for company, that logic flipped on its head. The front, with its streetlight glow and sight lines from neighbors' windows, suddenly seemed like the part of the house that belonged to the world. A stage under observation. The back felt like a blind spot. A pocket tucked just far enough away from casual eyes that anything could move through it without being seen. The thought slid into my head uninvited. If somebody wanted to walk up along my driveway right now, between my car and the side wall, they could stand under this very window and no one but me would know. If I even noticed. Something tapped the siding to my left. It was small, but sharp. A quick, hollow knock about knee height on the outside wall, like the house had been flicked with 2 fingers. I jumped, the flashlight beam lurching up to paint the ceiling in white. It came again a moment later, slightly higher this time. A thin, dry-sounding contact in the middle of all that water. Not rhythmic, not constant, just offbeat. Tap, pause, tap, tap. I swallowed and edged closer to the window, the light now pointed down at the counter instead of out. Loose branch, I told myself. There was an old tree near the property line, and I had heard those branches scrape the roof when the wind hit them right. It made sense that something might be swinging and brushing the siding now. The storm was easily strong enough to knock all kinds of debris around. The problem was, I did not remember any branch ever being that close to this part of the wall. Tap. This time, it sounded a little farther away, like whatever it was had shifted with the wind. A branch, I said under my breath, giving the word a little more force than it needed. Loose siding. Anything. Rain drummed overhead in waves. The wind threaded itself around the corners of the house and made this low moaning sound somewhere near the eaves, the kind of hollow whistle you hear in badly sealed windows and under old doors. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I broke eye contact with the blinds and turned toward the drawers by the stove. The light followed, catching on the metal handles, the pale laminate countertop, the scattering of crumbs I had not gotten around to wiping up. My hand was trembling just enough that I noticed it when I reached for the handle. 3rd drawer down. That is where I kept things that did not really have a home. Takeout menus, rubber bands, a dead pen or 2, and the candle. The drawer rasped open. Inside, my fingers found the small, round glass jar by touch alone. When I brought it out, the label caught the flashlight. Vanilla bean in curly letters. A picture of something that probably used to be a flower. It was a cheap candle from the clearance aisle at Walmart. I had bought it half as a joke, telling myself that if the power ever went out, at least my impending claustrophobic meltdown would smell like dessert. Now, holding it, the joke did not feel all that funny. I set the candle on the counter, clicked the drawer shut with my hip, and reached up to the cabinet where I kept matches and batteries. The small box of matches slid into my palm. It rattled softly, a dry, papery sound that somehow cut through the muffled roar of the storm. The first strike skidded without catching. The second flared to life with a hiss, sulfur stinging my nose. I cupped the tiny flame with my hand and lowered it to the blackened wick. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wick drank the fire and bloomed. Warm yellow light spilled out over the counter, softer and wider than the phone's harsh white beam. The shadows in the corners drew back a little, but grew deeper where they retreated to, sharpening into long, stretched shapes that ran down the hallway and into the living room. The candle flame swayed and jittered in the moving air, painting everything in slow, nervous motion. The smell hit a second later, sweet vanilla with a chalky, artificial edge. It pushed against the cooler scents of damp wall and old detergent from the laundry nook, an almost comical layer of bakery sweetness over storm rot. I clicked off the phone flashlight. The room shrank again, the edges rounding slightly under the candle's flicker. The storm outside roared on, unaffected. Persistent rain on the roof, harder now. Wind moaning through some unseen gap in the structure. That occasional, irregular tap-tap along the back siding, as if the house itself was being tested by an unseen finger. I stood between the window and the candle, feeling the draft slide past my bare legs. The flame leaned toward the hallway, then corrected itself. In that moment, with the vanilla scent in my nose and the storm pressing against the walls, I told myself, very firmly, that the only thing out there in the open space behind my house was wet air and wind-tossed branches. And I decided not to walk the extra 6 steps down the hall to confirm whether or not the back door, the one I had shoved with my foot and never really checked, was actually latched. 3.3. The door chime that should not have worked. I told myself I was not going to be one of those people who stands in their own kitchen staring out a window until they spook themselves. I left the candle burning on the counter, its little circle of light pulsing gently against the cabinets, and walked back down the short hallway toward the living room. Without the overhead lights, the house felt narrower. Nothing but that strip of flickering yellow behind me, and the storm outside to define the space. The living room looked softer in the candle spill from the kitchen. The edges of the couch and coffee table blurred a little. The TV screen was a dark, reflective slab, catching a faint twitch of flame from the other room. I sat back down on the couch, sinking into the same groove I had been in 10 minutes earlier, only now my console was dead, and the controller was just a piece of plastic instead of a lifeline to distraction. The cushion under my legs still held a little warmth from where I had been before the blackout, but the air on my arms felt cooler. The storm pushed a low boom across the roof, more like a growl now than a crack. I picked my phone back up and woke the screen. The light was harsh against my eyes after the candle glow, but I let it be. The little bars in the corner told me what I already suspected. My data signal was there, but weak. Pages crawled open. Apps spun and hesitated. A couple of messages from earlier in the day sat at the top of my notifications. Underneath those, fresh alerts from the weather app stacked in a neat little vertical row. Severe thunderstorm warning, tornado watch, potential for damaging winds. I thumbed them away without opening them. I could hear the warning just fine on my roof. For a second, I hovered over my co-workers' group chat. I could already see the message in my head. Power just cut out on my side. If I'm late tomorrow, blame the grid. Then I pictured the messages not sending, the little spinning wheel next to each one, and it felt stupidly vulnerable. I backed out instead and pulled up a social app, watched as it tried and failed to load new posts. Fine. I scrolled through older stuff, old pictures, older jokes, half reading, half not. The candle in the kitchen flicked and threw brief changes in the room's light, enough to make it feel like something was moving in my peripheral vision, even when there was nothing there. The storm noise became a constant backdrop. Rain on the roof, on the siding, on the driveway. Occasional wind gusts that made the windows complain. Thunder moving in slow circuits overhead. I was starting to settle into that strange, suspended state that happens during blackouts, where time feels wobblier and the dark becomes something you're just sharing space with when it happened. In the middle of my lazy scroll, a sound cut through the room. Ding-dong. 2 clean notes, rising and falling, perfectly formed. The door chime. The exact same pleasant little tune it had played earlier when the stranger was standing on my porch. For a heartbeat, I did not move. I did not even breathe. The sound was so familiar that my brain tried to slot it into its usual place. Someone pressed the doorbell, but that did not fit anymore, and the mismatch made my skin crawl. The power was out. I had watched it die. I had watched the TV go black, felt the AC quit, seen the stove clock vanish. The chime was plugged into the wall in the hallway. No electricity should have meant no sound. My mouth went dry. The phone slipped a little in my hand as some reflex in me tensed up. I turned my head toward the hallway, slowly, like any sudden movement might knock another sound loose. From the couch, I could see just enough. The narrow slice of the hallway entrance, the dim rectangle of beige wall, the faint glow from the candle in the kitchen licking at the edge of the doorway. The outlet where the ring chime was plugged in was somewhere in that strip of wall. In the dark. Dead. Another low rumble of thunder moved over the house. Not close, but not far either. It felt like punctuation, underlining something that was only half formed in my mind. I listened for another chime, another voice, a knock. Nothing. Just rain and wind and the subtle shifting of the house as it adjusted to both. My first thought, because the human brain hates gaps and will fill them with anything, is that maybe the chime had glitched. Maybe it had stored just enough whatever in its circuits to spit out one last sound when the power dropped completely. Some kind of residual charge or delayed response. Like an echo, I told myself. Like lag. The explanation felt flimsy even as I formed it. For one thing, the power had not just gone out. It had been off for several minutes. Long enough for me to stand in my living room, swear, check my phone, walk through the house, light a candle, stand at the window, tell myself lies about branches. Why would it wait until now to cough up a leftover chime? And if it was going to glitch, why would the tone be so perfect? No warble, no cutoff, just 2 crisp, friendly notes in a room that had no business sounding friendly. I lifted the phone a little, the screen light reflecting faintly on the ceiling. My thumb, moving almost on its own, tapped on the Ring app again. The same red banner greeted me. Device offline. No new events, no fresh motion alerts, just a flat timeline with nothing where that sound should have been. The hair on my arms stood up, prickling in the warm, still air. I put the phone down on my thigh and just sat there, listening to my own breathing. The candle popped once in the kitchen, wax shifting, the flame twitching taller and then shrinking. Far away, thunder rolled again, this time with just enough delay after a flash of light through the blinds that I could feel the distance between them. Flash, 1, 2, 3, boom. At least that made sense. Light first, then sound. The chime did not make sense. I tried to tell myself that maybe the sound had not come from the chime at all. Maybe it was something from outside that, by sheer coincidence, happened to mimic those notes. A car alarm or a piece of someone's ringtone sliding in through the storm. But I had lived with that specific tone for months. I knew its exact pitch, the way the second note fell a little softer than the first. The sound that had hung in my living room just now had been identical. It was the kind of wrong that does not scream. It just sits beside you and breathes. Another flash of lightning pulsed behind the blinds, turning each slat into a bright horizontal bar for a split second. The room lit up in a stark, colorless way, that made the candlelight look dirty by comparison. In that harsh, momentary light, I did not intend to look at the front window. I was staring straight ahead at the TV, but the window's reflection sat just above it. This faint, doubled image of the world outside. Something moved in that reflection. Reflex pulled my eyes up before the light was gone. Through the blinds themselves, in the tiny cracks where they did not quite meet, I saw more than I wanted to. The lightning had lit up the front of the house, the small patch of yard, the sidewalk, and the street beyond, as if it were noon. Across the lower part of that view, right along the line of the window, a darker shape slid past. Not a full silhouette, not a clear face, just the suggestion of a shoulder, a head, the curve of someone's back as they moved along the porch area and then away, crossing the field of vision at a casual walking pace. From my angle, it looked like they were stepping off to the side, as if they had been standing close to the door and were now drifting along the front of the house, away from it. The light died before my brain could sharpen the details. The afterimage burned on the inside of my eyes, a negative smear of motion. The thunder that followed was a few seconds behind the flash this time, but it came in hard. A heavy, rolling boom that made the picture frames on the wall tremble just enough to click against the paint. I sat there, suddenly and acutely aware of how quiet it was between the gusts, of how, in that quiet, certain sounds seemed to choose when and where to appear. A chime that should not have had power, a shadow that should not have been that close to my window without triggering anything I could point to later. I did not stand up. I did not go to the peephole this time. I stayed on the couch, candlelight breathing behind me, storm breathing outside, eyes fixed on the dead TV screen that now showed me nothing but my own pale reflection and the faint silhouette of the blinds behind it, waiting for the next sound that did not belong. For one, curiosity pulls me toward the kitchen. There is a point where doing nothing feels more dangerous than moving. Sitting there on the couch, phone in my hand, the echo of that impossible chime still hanging somewhere in the room, and the image of that shadow slipping past the front window burned into my eyes. I hit that point. My mind would not shut up. Door chime with no power. A shape at the window when no one should be near my porch. Ring app dead. Street dark. I kept telling myself I was being irrational, that storms make sounds do weird things, that lightning plays tricks on your vision. But there is a voice under all of that, the older one, the one that lives underneath whatever you have learned about staying calm and not overreacting. That voice was not buying any of it. I stared at the dead TV screen a little longer, watching my own reflection breathe in candle-washed shadow, and realized that if I stayed planted on that couch, I was going to imagine something worse than whatever might actually be happening. Doing nothing felt like tying my own hands. I picked up my phone again, this time for the flashlight, not for distraction. The beams sliced the room open, turning the soft edges from the kitchen candle back into hard lines. The coffee table, the controller, the dirty fork on my plate, all of it snapped back into harsh focus. I stood up, and the couch cushions exhaled behind me. The house reacted to the movement with a quiet chorus, a faint creak from somewhere in the ceiling, a whisper from the vents as leftover air shifted, the subtle tick of cooling plastic from the electronics. Barefoot, I moved toward the hall. The laminate under my feet felt colder than it had earlier, a chill seeping up from the subfloor that had not been there when the AC was still doing its job. Every step made a sound I usually did not hear. The tiniest groan of boards, the faintest kiss of skin on smooth surface. It was like someone had turned the gain up on the entire house, The hallway swallowed me again. A narrow slice of darkness framed by doorways and the distant, flickering yellow of the candle in the kitchen. The tiny laundry nook to my right loomed out of the shadows as I passed, washer and dryer hulking shapes with their white enamel catching bits of my flashlight. One of the detergent bottles on the shelf above them rattled almost imperceptibly when the wind hit the side of the house, as if agreeing with my decision to move. Past the laundry, the door to the detached garage sat closed. I could feel the temperature drop half a degree as I passed its edge, cooler air leaking down around my ankles from whatever gaps existed between that door and its frame. The gap beneath it was just a black stripe, but it claimed more of my attention than it deserved. On the other side of the hall, the back door waited. Even before I turned toward the kitchen, I could feel its presence like a small pressure at my left shoulder. Cheap exterior wood, a brass knob, a deadbolt I could not remember touching. A small square of frosted glass above the handle, facing the driveway and the dark spine of the detached garage. I tried to pretend I was walking straight to the candle, not drawn toward that door. The beam from my phone drifted down the hall, and the kitchen opened in front of me the way it always did. A rectangular box with the counter on one side, the stove and fridge on the other, and the window giving everything context. The candle on the counter had burned lower. Wax had pooled in the bottom of the jar in a cloudy ring, and the wick stood shorter, crooked, its top glowing red under the small flame. The glass was fogged halfway up from the heat. The light it threw was less bold now, softer, flickering like it was thinking about giving up. The smell of vanilla had thickened in the enclosed space, heavier and almost cloying. But underneath it, I could smell other things now. The damp in the walls, faint detergent from the laundry nook, a cold mineral note from the water in the pipes. The air itself felt different. When I had lit the candle, the kitchen had still felt sealed, like the warmth from earlier was lingering. Now there was a thread of coolness woven through it, like a draft had found a way in from outside and was quietly unspooling itself along the floor and up around my legs. I moved closer to the window over the sink. The blinds were still tilted half closed, but in the spaces between the slats, I could see more of the night beyond. My phone light stayed low, angled at the counter, so my own face would not bounce back at me from the glass. Out there, the storm maintained its campaign. Rain streaked down in slanted lines, sometimes thickening into sheets that blurred everything, sometimes thinning out just enough to let the silhouettes of neighboring houses sharpen. The driveway was a slick strip of dark, reflecting whatever stray glow the sky offered. The vague bulk of the detached garage sat to the side, its roof glistening, water dripping steadily from its edges. For a few seconds, nothing moved but the weather. Then lightning struck somewhere closer than I liked. The flash hit so fast and so bright that it turned the entire view outside into a black and white photograph. The wet length of my driveway, every little puddle in the broken spots, the fence lines, the angles of the roofs, all of it stepped forward in brutal, unforgiving clarity. The color was scrubbed away, just stark outlines in burnt white and charcoal. I saw the empty patch of concrete where my car sat. The garage door closed, the gate latched. No figure, no one standing by the fence or in the space between the garage and the house. Just water and wood and asphalt branded into my vision for a heartbeat. Then the light died, and thunder slammed over the house almost on top of it, a hard, concussive bang that rattled the dishes in the cabinets. The blinds snapped back against the window as the wind shouldered the wall. The afterimage of that illuminated driveway floated in front of me like a ghost even after my eyes adjusted. a negative burned into my retinas. I blinked it away and stepped back from the sink. The coolness in the room had crept up higher, tracing a path up the backs of my legs, under the hem of my shorts. It did not feel like AC air, no mechanical push, no steady stream, just a slow, seeping chill. My gaze drifted to the back door almost without my permission. It stood a few feet away, solid and bland, and somehow the most important object in the room. In the candlelight and the faint spill from my phone, the lines of it were clear. The frame, the panels, the little square of frosted glass set above the handle. The glass glowed very faintly with the reflected light, milky and opaque, hiding whatever was on the other side, while still hinting that something was there. I took a step toward it. The candle popped softly behind me, a tiny tick of cooling wax. Somewhere up in the ceiling, a vent rattled as the wind shifted the pressure in the ducts. The storm on this side of the house sounded more muffled than at the front. Not a direct assault, more of a constant drumming, like being underneath a large, relentless hand tapping its fingers on the roof. I stopped with my face a couple of feet from the frosted pane. Up close, I could see tiny imperfections in the glass, little swirls and bubbles in the texture. It reminded me of bathroom windows, of cheap office doors. It was designed to blur things, to turn the outside world into vague shadows and movements. My hand lifted almost of its own accord and found the doorknob. The metal was cold. Not room temperature cool, not the neutral chill of something that has been sitting in an air-conditioned house all day. This was a deeper cold, the kind that felt like it had been in contact with outside air more recently than it should have been. My fingers tightened around it. I felt the shape of the knob, the faint grease from my own fingers from 100 other uses, the tiny imperfections where the plating had rubbed off near the base. And in the back of my mind, a question. Had I locked it? I replayed coming in earlier. The rush through the rain, the shove of my shoulder against the door, the careless heel kick to send it swinging back toward its frame, the clack of my keys on the counter. I could remember all of that in crisp, humiliating detail. What I could not remember, no matter how hard I tried to drag the memory up, was the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, the thumb turning on the lock, the small, satisfying click that meant the back of my house had been sealed off from the strip of open darkness where concrete met grass. My hand stayed on the knob, feeling its stolen cold, while the storm breathed against the outer wall and the candle sighed behind me. And it occurred to me that privacy and isolation are not the same thing at all. 4.2. The lightning snapshot of a stranger. There is a kind of stupidity that only shows up in hindsight. Standing there with my face just a little too close to that frosted glass, hand curled around a doorknob I probably had not locked. I was in the middle of it. At the time, it did not feel stupid. It felt necessary. I told myself I was just trying to reassure myself. If I could prove the back door was solid, if I could feel the lock in place, maybe the wrongness of the chime and the shadow at the front window would shrink back down into something like coincidence. So I leaned in. The frosted pane was at eye level, a cloudy square of milky texture that turned the world outside into vague gradients of dark and less dark. From where I stood, I could not see anything specific. No fence lines, no shape of the garage, just a general suggestion of night pressing against glass. My forehead was close enough that I could feel a faint chill radiating off the pane. My fingers tightened on the knob, thumb hovering an inch from the deadbolt latch. The house huddled around me. The candle in the kitchen hissed and ticked softly as molten wax shifted in its jar. Somewhere in the ductwork above, something rattled. A loose vent, or just the metal adjusting to another hit of wind. The storm on this side of the house was more muffled than at the front, but more constant. Rain drumming on the roof, sliding down the siding, pooling somewhere in the dark. I was just about to test the lock when the sky ripped open again. Lightning came so fast and so close it did not feel like it was outside anymore. There was no gentle ramping up of glow through the blinds. No warning. 1 second I was staring at a dim, grayish square. The next, the pane erupted into pure white. The frosted glass turned into a luminous screen, every swirl and bubble in its texture lit from behind by something that felt like it was inches away, not miles up. And on that glowing surface, for a split second, a shape appeared. A head and shoulders, dark against the white, clear in the way a shadow puppet is clear. No details, just outline. It was close. Not out in the driveway, not near the garage, not at the edge of the yard. The silhouette was right there, inches from me, on the other side of the glass. The head was slightly turned, angled down toward the level of the handle, like someone was leaning in, pressing closer to see inside. The proportions were wrong for anything but a person. Rounded skull, slope of neck, one shoulder a little higher than the other. In that frozen heartbeat of electric light, the pane might as well have been a screen in a dark theater, and I was staring at someone standing in front of it. Then the thunder hit. The crack came almost on top of the flash, a brutal blast that punched the air in the kitchen and made the counter vibrate. The candle flame jumped sideways, stretching long and thin before snapping upright again, throwing mad shadows across the walls. I stumbled back so hard my heel skidded on the laminate. My hand ripped away from the knob, fingers suddenly boneless. The phone wobbled in my grip, and the flashlight beam jerked wild across the ceiling, the cabinets, the corner where the laundry nook began. For a second, I thought I was going to drop it and be left in nothing but candlelight and the memory of that outline. My heart slammed against my ribs with enough force that I could feel it in my throat, thick and choking. My vision narrowed, the edges of the room fuzzing out as my body tried to decide whether to run, collapse, or vanish. I ended up doing none of those things. I just stood there, a few steps back from the door, arm half raised, phone jittering slightly in my hand. The light quivered over the back wall, catching on the white of the door frame, the silver siding of the fridge, the dull shine of the sink. The frosted pane had gone back to its usual murky gray. Whatever had been on the other side was invisible again. Before I could force my breath to even out, I heard it. A soft, deliberate click at my shoulder height, not from the front of the house, not from somewhere in the roof, from the back door. The sound of metal moving against metal, just a small turn, the first test of a doorknob being tried from the outside. The knob itself twitched in the corner of my vision. Not a full jerk, not a desperate rattling, just a slow, testing pressure. The kind of motion you use when you are not sure whether something is locked, and you do not want to make more noise than you have to. The door did not open. It gave a little, though. I heard the faintest dull thud of it meeting the frame more solidly, like it had already been almost closed and someone had pressed just hard enough to seat it, or like the wood around it had swollen in the humidity and was holding on by friction alone. Then, muffled through the thickness of the door and that small square of glass, the voice came again. Closer now. "Hey!" The words stretched just a bit, dragged by the barrier but unmistakably human, male, mid-30s if I had to guess. "Seriously, it's pouring out here, man." I know you're home. I heard you earlier." The way he said pouring almost had a smile in it, like this was some minor shared inconvenience we could laugh about if I would just let him in. The repetition hit me where the first phrases had already dug in. "I know you're home. I heard you earlier." The same idea he had pushed through the front door, wrapped in slightly different words, now pressed into the back of the house like he had simply walked around the perimeter, following the layout in his head. He should not have known exactly where I was in here. He should not have been this casual. The pane above the handle glowed faintly with reflected candlelight and my phone's jittery beam, turning his voice into an image in my head. A man inches from the glass, head turned just enough to listen, one hand on the knob, the other maybe braced against the siding. Every instinct in me screamed to answer. Part of me wanted to yell, to shout something like, "I called the cops," or "Get away from my house," or even a simple "Go." Anything to push back against the presence on the other side of that thin barrier. Another part wanted to bargain, to say, "I can call a tow for you. Just stay outside." To make this into a normal interaction. To shove the situation back into a script I recognized. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted metal. The fear that if I spoke again, if I gave him anything else to latch onto, he would use my own voice like a lever, pried my jaw shut. My breathing sounded too loud in the small kitchen. Each inhale and exhale seemed to scrape against the inside of my skull. I tried to quiet it, as if he might hear that through wood and insulation and decide something from it. Was it the same man as before at the front door? The cadence sounded right. The casual man, the easy tone. But there was a new edge under it now, a faint tension that had not been there when he first said, "Hey man, my car died out here?" Or was I imagining that, layering my own fear onto his words? Another thought crept in, colder than the draft at my ankles. What if it was not the same voice? What if there were two of them? One at the front, one at the back, passing the house between them like something they were studying from all sides. The storm pressed closer. Rain streaked down the unseen glass of the back door, turning the frosted pane into a dim, shimmering surface. In the candlelight, it looked almost like a low-brightness screen, something glowing with its own sickly light. Droplets traced slow, warped paths down it, catching what little radiance there was and dragging it in crooked lines. The knob clicked again, just a fraction of an inch this time. Testing, measuring how much give there was. "Come on," the voice said, a little softer, like I was a stubborn friend. "I just need a phone. It's not a big deal." He said it like it was nothing, like being on my property, at my back door in a blackout, somehow did not count as crossing a line. I pressed my free hand flat against my own chest, feeling the stuttering impacts of my heart through the fabric of my hoodie, and stayed absolutely still. The only sounds in that moment were the rain drumming its fingers on the roof, the wind moaning somewhere in the loose parts of the house, the dull clack of the knob being gently tested, and my own breathing, dragging in and out like someone else's in my ears. I did not answer him. I did not move. On my side of the glass, the kitchen was a small pocket of flickering light and vanilla-scented heat, wrapped in a larger box of dark. On his side, there was nothing but storm and whatever had brought him to my door in the first place. Caught between those two worlds, with only inches of wood and blurred glass separating us, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. A pure animal certainty that if I broke the silence now, I would be giving away something I could not get back. 4-3. The first steps inside. At some point, your body decides it has heard enough and starts moving before you finish the thought. For me, that point came standing there at the back door, staring at a pane of frosted glass that had just shown me the outline of a head and shoulders inches away, listening to a stranger test my doorknob while he calmly reminded me he had heard me earlier. Every nerve I had was buzzing. It felt like my skin did not quite fit right. Slowly, very slowly, I began to back away. I kept my eyes on the door as long as I could, phone light lowered, breath held tight. I tried to make each backward step as soft as possible, rolling my feet heel to toe on the laminate, willing the floor not to complain. The kitchen blurred at the edges as I left it behind. The candle flame wobbled in the corner of my vision, throwing long shadows down the hall. The closer I got to that hallway, the more the house seemed to stretch. What had always been a few casual strides now felt like a tunnel. The doorway to the laundry nook on my right became a dark mouth I did not want to turn my back on. The door to the garage on my left felt like it was holding its breath. Even the rectangle of the living room at the end of the hall, with its familiar couch and dead TV, looked farther away than it should have, like the house had decided to add a few feet while the lights were off. Behind me, the storm kept up its steady assault, rain drumming the roof, wind pushing at any weak spot it could find. But underneath that, closer, there was a new layer of sound, the almost imperceptible hush of the draft, trying to sneak past the edges of the back door. The faint rattle in the glass whenever a stronger gust hit. The memory of that doorknob's tiny clicks replaying on a loop in my skull. I made it 2-3 steps into the hall before it happened. The house spoke. It started with a low, unwilling groan of wood from somewhere behind me. A sound I knew, in the way you know the particular complaint of your own floorboards or the hinge that always catches. But this time it came from the direction of the door, not the hall. I stopped moving. For a heartbeat, I tried to tell myself it was just the wind pressing against the frame, just the storm shifting the structure around me. Houses do that. They creak, they settle. Then came a small, wet slap, soft but distinct, like something slick had made contact with the laminate just beyond the threshold. Not a drip, not the scatter of rain. The sound had weight behind it, my throat closed. What followed next erased whatever flimsy rationalizing I had left. A long, slow creak unspooled into the hallway, this time unquestionably from the back door. I did not have to turn around to understand what it was. You know the sound of your own doors, the drawn-out complaint they make when they are opened against humidity-swollen jambs and aging hinges. It had that drawn-out, reluctant quality, the door easing open just a few inches, the wood protesting, then giving way. Air moved. A thin, cold draft brushed over the backs of my legs, winding up under my shorts, climbing my spine. It smelled like outside, wet asphalt, a hint of exhaust from cars on the main road, that metallic tang storms have when the air is worked raw. The candle in the kitchen reacted instantly. Its flame flared, then flattened sideways as if someone had blown hard from the direction of the back door. Shadows on the wall snapped into long, violent streaks before wobbling back into their previous positions. For a moment after, there was utter stillness. No voice, no more creaks, just the storm pressing on the roof, the soft hiss of rain on the driveway, and a new, colder presence settled in the bones of the house. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, yes, but with a weight behind them that no loose branch or swinging shutter could imitate. One step on the laminate. A muted thud, followed by the tiniest stick peel of something wet lifting away from the floor. Another, slightly closer. the sound vibrating through the thin material under my feet. A third. They were not rushed. They did not stagger. Whoever was making them was walking with the slow, measured pace of someone who believes they have time. The steps stopped. I could feel rather than see the point where they had paused, in that stretch of floor between the kitchen and the laundry nook, where the hallway felt most like a funnel. Behind me, the draft settled into a steady seep instead of a gust. The air changed again. It layered somehow. The warm, stale breath of the house from earlier mixed with the cold, damp breath of outside. Vanilla from the candle, detergent from the laundry nook, wet concrete and some faint, sour note I could not immediately place. Sweat, or cheap cologne that had been rained on, or just the smell of a person bringing their heat and history into a space that had not been prepared to hold it. In that narrow band of silence that followed the footsteps, I heard something so small that if I had not been straining for it, I would have missed it. Inhalation, close behind me. A quick pull of air through a nose that whistled just barely on one side, like there was a curve or a break somewhere in the bridge. It sounded like someone filling their lungs before speaking. The house seemed to lean with me as I tipped my head, just a fraction, unable to stop listening, too terrified to turn all the way around. The phone in my hand weighed 3 times what it should have. My thumb hovered near the volume button, like that could somehow make any of this quieter. He did not call out the way he had at the door. No knock, no polite request. Just that breath, and then in the same voice I had heard through the wood. Rough, mid-30s, the casual consonants slackened by the storm and the effort it had taken to get inside. He spoke. Not to me, not exactly. "Told you I just needed to get out of the rain, Dad." He said it almost lightly, almost amused. The words rolled out like part of a script he had practiced. Like he was repeating a line he had used before, maybe more than once, to someone who had believed him. The word Dad knifed straight through me. My father had been dead for years, long gone, buried, name carved into stone 2 counties away. He had never set foot in this house, never stood in this hallway, never heard this storm. Hearing that word in my kitchen, in that man's mouth, made everything tilt. It did not sound like he was talking to a memory. There was no grief in it, no softness, no catch. It sounded practiced, functional, like part of a con he had run on other men in other houses. "Told you I just needed to get out of the rain, Dad," as if he was used to slipping into roles. Son, stranger, victim, whatever got him inside. As if somewhere in his history, there had been a father figure stupid enough to buy that line, to open a door, to let the storm and whatever walked with it into their living room. Behind his words, another thunder roll timed itself disturbingly well with my own pulse. Boom. Heartbeat. Boom. Heartbeat. They synced up for a few beats, to the point where I could not tell which thud belonged to the sky and which belonged to my chest. The difference between outdoor and indoor sound had changed now. Before, the storm had always been out there, a distant enclosing noise that made my house feel like a safe little pocket. Now the outside had a voice inside the walls, and the storm's roar was just a backdrop. The house's normal sounds had retreated. I did not hear the fridge anymore. I did not hear the tick of cooling metal from the electronics. All I heard was rain, thunder, the faint squeak of something wet on laminate a few feet behind me, and that voice replaying in my head. Dad. My mouth opened without my permission, a ragged breath forcing its way in, too loud in the silence. I could taste the damp on the air, that strange city storm flavor of wet tar and distant gasoline. Some tiny, detached part of me observed that this man was not yelling, not raging, not demanding. He was narrating his own story out loud, like he wanted to hear how it sounded in the air of my house. As if he had done this before. As if he liked listening to himself play the part. The candle in the kitchen guttered again, the flame bowing nearly horizontal for a second before springing back, smaller. Wax sloshed gently in the jar with a soft, thick noise. I did not turn around. I did not run forward. I hovered there in the hall, every muscle coiled, caught between fight and flight, and the third option nobody talks about enough. Freeze. Inside my skull, thunder and heartbeat kept trying to line up, while a stranger's quiet, amused sentence replayed over them both, running on a loop that I knew, even then, I would never fully shut off for the rest of my life. 5-2. The laundry room refuge. There is a moment when your body stops asking you what you want and just starts deciding. Mine picked the laundry room, between me and the back door, between me and that man breathing my air. There was one small space with another way out. The cramped little laundry nook and the door that led into the detached garage. Fight or flight finally kicked in, but it did not roar. It whispered, "Move." I eased one foot backward, then the other, keeping my shoulders turned just enough that I did not have to fully look away from the dark stretch of hallway behind me. The phone in my hand felt useless now. Any light would give me away. I thumbed the screen dark, and the beam died, leaving only the weak, flickering glow from the candle in the kitchen, licking at the far edge of the hall. The house shrank and stretched at the same time. The distance between me and the laundry room door felt both too short. I wanted miles, and too long, as if each step I took could be the one that finally creaked loud enough to pull his eyes down the hall. I tried to spread my weight over my feet, the way I had seen people do in movies, rolling on the sides, imagining the boards under the laminate like sensitive nerves I did not want to press. My legs felt hollow, my knees like they did not quite belong to me anymore. Behind me from the kitchen came a soft sound that made my skin crawl, the wet kiss of a shoe lifting from the floor, then the muted thud of it landing again. He was still moving. I slipped sideways into the laundry room. Room is generous. It was more of a shallow box carved into the right side of the hallway, just big enough for the washer and dryer to face outward with about a foot of standing space in front of them. The tile floor under my toes was colder than the laminate, and rougher. Little chips and imperfections in the surface bit into my skin. The washer was old, its white enamel scratched and dulled. The dryer beside it had a dent in the front panel from the day I misjudged a laundry basket swing. A wire shelf ran across the wall above them, sagging slightly in the middle under the weight of detergent bottles, a half-empty tub of powdered soap, and a stack of worn towels that never quite lost the smell of damp. To my right, set into the wall, was the door to the garage. It was heavier than the back door, solid in a way that felt older, with a manual lock. A simple thumb turn above the knob. No windows. Nothing that looked out. On the other side of it, I knew, was cool darkness. The hollow of the garage with its oil stains, its smell of concrete and cardboard and old rubber. An exit, if I could make it that far without him hearing. For now, just knowing it was there made the tiny space feel less like a trap and more like a potential tunnel. I reached back with my free hand and eased the laundry room door toward its frame. The hinges complained a little, a faint, high-pitched squeak that made every muscle in my body lock. I froze with the door almost closed, just shy of the latch touching home. If I let it click all the way, even softly, that sound might stand out in this new, stripped-down version of the house. So I left it slightly ajar, a narrow sliver of vertical darkness opening onto the dimmer, longer darkness of the hall. A faint band of light from the kitchen candle reached that crack, turning it into a thin, warm line against the cooled shadow. I turned off my phone screen completely and slipped it into the pocket of my hoodie. The laundry room dropped into near blackness. Only a faint wash of amber trickled in from under the door and through that narrow gap, painting a thin rectangle on the tile by my toes. The air in there smelled like old fabric softener and something else. Damp concrete. The ghost of mildew always trying to get a foothold in the corners. It was heavier than the air in the kitchen, less stirred. My breathing sounded loud in it. Too loud. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth and tried to slow it down. The washer made a tiny tick as some leftover heat in its metal casing bled off. Another answered it from the dryer. Tiny noises I had never noticed on normal nights became distinct now, each one like a small creature turning over in its sleep. Beyond the not-quite-closed door, the house rearranged its soundtrack. I heard him. His footsteps moved slowly, unhurried, from the kitchen back into the hallway. The sound of wet soles on laminate came in a pattern I could not stop decoding. Step, pause, faint shuffle, step, longer pause. Like he was not just walking, but listening between each move, taking the measure of the place. The storm's voice changed quality filtered through the walls and the laundry door. It was more distant here, more like a constant shushing than a roar. The vertical rain on the siding became an endless, soft hiss. Thunder was a low pressure somewhere in my chest, rather than a crack in my ears. From the garage side, through the solid door to my right, I could hear the occasional plink of water dripping from the frame or roof onto the concrete floor. Those tiny impacts echoed in the enclosed, hollow space beyond, giving them a weird importance. I did not dare try the garage lock yet. My bare feet curled slightly on the tile, as if trying to grip it. I pressed my back against the cool wall opposite the machines, flattening myself as much as possible into the narrow slice of nothing between the washer and the door. If he peered through the crack, maybe the angle would hide me. Maybe the shadows would be kind. His steps drew closer. I could tell by the way the sound changed as he moved from the wider kitchen into the more echoing hall. The acoustics tightened. His weight on the floor seemed more concentrated, the subtle squeak of laminate under his shoes clearer. He did not talk. The last words he had said, "Told you I just needed to get out of the rain, Dad," still hung in my head like a stain, but he did not repeat them. He did not knock on walls or call my name or pretend to cough. He just walked, paused, listened. As he crossed the threshold from kitchen to hall, I heard something else right along with his movement. The faint, dragging sound of wet fabric brushing against itself. His clothes were soaked. Every step probably sent little flecks of water onto my floor. Tiny, dark crescents that would be there in the morning if I ever made it to morning. He passed the point where, if he turned his head just slightly, he might see the edge of the laundry room door and the thin sliver of light bleeding around it. My heart was pounding so hard now that it felt like it had moved locations, crawling up into my throat. Each beat pushed against my tongue. I counted them, stupidly, trying to line them up with his pace. He stopped. The footsteps went silent, but I knew he was still there because the silence thickened. The hush of his not moving landed on top of the hush of the storm, on top of the hush of my held breath. For a second, I thought he was just outside the laundry room door, inches away, listening the way I was. There was a tiny sound, so small I almost filed it under imagination. A soft exhale, barely audible, whistling just a little through that same bent nose or crooked bridge I had heard at the back door. He was somewhere between the kitchen and the living room entry now, based on the way his weight had sounded. But in the dark, with no visuals, it might as well have been 3 inches or 30 feet. The house held its breath with me. The washer ticked again, metal cooling. It sounded like gunfire in the silence. From the garage wall, another plink echoed as a droplet found its way down. The storm outside rolled another low growl over the roof. Distant lightning, flashing just enough that even through the walls, I sensed the change in pressure. My entire world had shrunk to this. A rectangle of dim light under a door, the smell of old fabric softener and damp concrete, the whisper of someone else's wet shoes exploring the spaces that, until that night, I had thought of as mine. 5-2, the man testing. The rooms, when you cannot see, sound turns into a map. A bad one, scribbled and incomplete. But it is all you have. In that cramped little laundry room, pressed between cold tile and the cool wall, I had nothing but that map. Every noise in the house drew another shaky line. Here. He is here now. I heard him move. The soft, wet thuds of his shoes shifted from the tight echo of the hallway into the duller, padded hush of the living room carpet. The difference was subtle, but I knew my own floors. I had walked them 1,000 times half awake. The laminate in the hall nagged under each footstep. The carpet drank sound. Step. Soft. Another step, slightly heavier where the padding under the carpet was worn thin in front of the couch. There was a faint drag sound, like a hand sliding along the wall or the back of the couch. Fingers trailing over paint and fabric as he walked, feeling the space, claiming it. Thunder rolled somewhere further away now, a long, low presence rather than a violent crack. The storm had shifted, or I had stopped noticing the hardest hits. All my focus tunneled inward, away from the sky, into the walls of my own house. He stopped moving for a second. The silence from the living room was thick enough that I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a hot, steady thud. The washer ticked softly behind me, cooling. Somewhere in the garage, something dripped. Then, from out there, a new sound. Knuckles. Not on a door. On drywall. A casual little rap. 3 short taps somewhere along the hallway wall. Like someone checking for a stud or knocking just to see if anyone would answer. The sound traveled through the skeleton of the house and into my back. I squeezed my eyes shut. He muttered something under his breath, words half-formed, too low to make out properly. One phrase rose just enough to separate from the mush. "Warmer in here?" The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not grateful, not relieved, just observational, like he was assessing a product. Another shuffle, another wet footstep on carpet. I pictured him standing near the coffee table now, near the dead console, the useless TV. Knew this one wasn't empty. The sentence floated down the hall and seeped under the laundry door. My mouth went dry. How? The lights were off. The power was out. From the street, my house would have looked like a dark box, same as the vacant one at the end of the cul-de-sac. But he had chosen mine. Had walked up to my front door, then my back door, with the confidence of someone who already had the answer. I imagined him standing above my half-finished plate of pasta, above the controller on the table, looking at the little details that betrayed a life in motion. Another small sound from the living room proved that image right. Plastic on wood, a controller being nudged or picked up and put back down, a headset's foam ear cup brushing the table. Then, clearly, as if he had turned his head slightly toward the couch and spoken directly to it. "You gaming in here, huh?" The casual, almost friendly tone on the word gaming made bile rise in my throat. It was the way an older brother talks to you when he catches you watching something you should not. Familiar, knowing, wrong. He knew what he was looking at. He recognized the setup. TV, console, headset, the whole little shrine to distraction. This was not his first time standing in a stranger's living room. The carpet muted most of his next steps, but I heard the shift when he swung back toward the hallway. The wet, soft thuds grew a little sharper again as he moved from carpet to laminate. Each footfall now echoed down the hall toward me, gaining clarity. Step. Closer. Step. Closer. The faint squeak of damp rubber on smooth flooring threaded through the bleak hush. I stared at the narrow band of light under the laundry room door. It flickered gently with the candle in the kitchen, a tiny pulse that made the shadows on the tile dance at the edges. As he approached, the darkness above that line changed. You would not think you could see something as subtle as a shadow shifting thicker through a crack. But when the rest of your world has collapsed to a few inches of space in front of your toes, you notice everything. The gray above the light grew heavier, like something had stepped between the candle and the gap. He was in the hallway. He walked right past the laundry room door. I felt rather than heard his presence sweep by, like a cold front. The draft changed direction. For a second, it seemed to pull toward the kitchen, sucked along in his wake. The smell of wet clothes, of outside air clinging to denim and cheap jacket lining, leaked around the edge of the door. His footsteps slowed, then stopped altogether. I did not breathe. I did not blink. The light under the door dimmed just a hair, as if he was directly across from it, body filling the narrow space on the other side. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. No knock, no jiggling of the handle, just that thick, suffocating pause, like the air itself was waiting to see which one of us would move first. In that stillness, I picked up a sound so faint and intimate it made my skin try to crawl off my bones. A sniff. Not a dramatic snort, just a quick, habitual pull of air through the nose, followed by the tiniest exhale, like he was smelling the air, like he was listening for subtle shifts in the way it moved around him. I pictured him tilting his head, leaning slightly toward the door, the way someone might lean toward the cracked window of a car to decide if it is occupied. The laundry door handle did not move. The lock did not rattle. But the weight of his attention pressing against that thin barrier was almost worse. My fingers dug into my phone in my pocket so hard that my nails bit through the fabric into my palm. Each pulse of my heartbeat throbbed in those fingers, matching the slow drum of thunder outside. Flash of thought. 9/11. The idea hit me like a bolt. Not of lightning, but of pure logic. Call now. Whisper, let them triangulate your panic. My thumb twitched toward the pocket zipper. Then my brain supplied the practical obstacles, one after another, like cards in a losing hand. There was barely any signal. The bars had been weak even before the power dropped. If the call failed, if it hung on calling for too long, the screen would stay lit. A small, bright rectangle in this tiny, dark room. The light would leak under the door, a telltale glow in the crack. All he would have to do is glance down. I imagined the flash of blue-white shining along that strip and the way his body might react. The quick bend, the hand on the knob, the push. My thumb stopped. My hand went still again, wrapped around plastic I suddenly hated for not being more than it was. The house around us held steady. like a held breath stretched to its final inch. The storm outside had quieted just enough between bursts that the sound of rain was a steady hiss instead of a drumline. The faint plink of the garage drip echoed again, absurdly loud for how small it was. The washer gave another thermal tick, like it too was flinching. Under everything, the heavy thud of my own heart tried to sync with the distant rumble in the sky. Boom, beat, boom, beat. I could not tell if the rhythm was real or if my panic was arranging it that way. He stayed there. Seconds dragged. 10, 20, or maybe it was 3. Time had come unhooked from anything solid. That pause outside the laundry room might be the clearest memory I have of the whole night. Not the dramatic flashes, not the voices, but that silent standoff separated by a door that was not even fully closed. Eventually, he moved. The darkness above the line of light thinned slightly, as if he had turned away. A soft, scuffing noise accompanied it. Shoe on laminate, pants brushing against the wall. He did not say a word as he went. His footfalls started up again, further down the hall now, toward my bedroom and the bathroom. Step, pause, faint shuffle, testing the rooms, measuring the life he had walked into, one quiet sound at a time, while I hid in a box that smelled like detergent and damp stone, clutching a useless phone and trying not to let my terror leak out under the door where he might catch its scent. 5.3. The garage door gamble. Hiding in the laundry room bought me minutes, not safety. You cannot live in a box the size of a closet while someone who should not be inside your house walks around in it like he owns the place. At some point, do not move becomes a death sentence instead of a survival tactic. The only way out that did not force me to cross open space in front of him was to my right, the garage. The thought slid into my head like a cold knife. If you can make it into the garage, you can get outside. If you can get outside, you can run. Run to where exactly, I did not know. Carl and Denise's house? Back down the street toward the main road? Out into a storm bad enough to knock out power for half the block? All of that seemed theoretical, something we could debate later. For now, away from the man inside my house was good enough. From the laundry room, I could still hear him moving. His footsteps had shifted toward the bedroom end of the hall, the direction opposite the kitchen. A soft thud as he crossed the threshold into my room. Another thud as he circled. The faint scrape of something. Maybe the closet door being nudged open. Maybe the edge of my desk being brushed with a hip. He was testing my spaces. The pause he had taken outside the laundry door sat heavy in my memory, but he had moved on. For now. I turned my head slowly toward the garage door, barely daring to breathe. The lock was a simple thumb turn above the knob. No deadbolt, no chain, just that small piece of metal between me and the hollow dark. In the faint strip of light leaking under the laundry room door, I could barely see the outline of it. I lifted my hand, fingers shaking so badly I could hear the tiny rustle of skin against metal. The thumb turn clicked when I moved it. Even trying to go slow, the sound came out sharp, a tiny gunshot in the cramped room. I flinched, teeth clenching, and froze to listen. Out in the hall, the house stayed in its awful suspended hush. No feet rushing, no voice calling, just the storm's distant hiss and the occasional muted creak as it pushed against the roof. I wrapped my hand around the knob and turned. This time I barely made a sound. The latch eased out of the strike plate with a soft, breathy sigh. I cracked the door open. Cool, damp air slid across my face immediately. carrying the smell of oil, old cardboard, and concrete that had sweated through long summers and cold winters. It was a different kind of dark on the other side. Bigger, emptier. The storm's noise was louder here, rumbling through the thin garage door like someone beating on the backside of a drum. I slipped through the gap and pulled the door mostly closed behind me, leaving it just a finger's width ajar, the reverse of what I had done with the laundry room. I needed that sliver, that connection, to keep listening. The garage swallowed me whole. No windows, no lamp. Only what little light bled from the laundry room crack and the occasional pulse of lightning seeping in around the edges of the big overhead door. My car sat to my left, a familiar hulking shape. Hood slick with condensation. Roof beaded with droplets blown in under the edges. The smell of wet metal and rubber rolled off it in waves. To the right, the workbench I barely used loomed against the wall, its top cluttered with a few useless tools, an old coffee can half full of screws, and a dead flashlight I suddenly wished I had put fresh batteries in months ago. Stacked cardboard boxes formed unstable towers beyond it, labeled with fading marker. Winter clothes, misc, kitchen stuff. Their surfaces were soft to the touch, sucking up moisture from the air. Straight ahead, the overhead garage door arched across the front of the space, its panels rattling gently with each heavy gust. The opener's motor hung from the ceiling on a metal bracket, a silent, useless shape in the dark now that the power was gone. My bare feet touched the concrete, and a new kind of cold shot up my legs. Not draft cold, not AC cold, earth cold. The kind that collects in places that never see direct light. For a few seconds, I just stood there, lungs dragging in air that tasted like dust and rain, listening through the crack behind me. From inside the house, muffled now by two doors and a wall, I could still pick out the intruder's movements if I focused hard enough. The faint thump of a drawer being opened, maybe in the nightstand, maybe in the dresser. The creak of my mattress springs as he sat on the edge of my bed for a second, testing how it held his weight. I realized he was learning the map too, learning it in reverse. From my room back toward the door I had just slipped through. I did not have much time. The only way out was the big door. In an ideal world, I would have hit the button on the wall and watched it glide up like always, the motor doing all the work, the noise masked by the storm. But that option had died with the rest of the electric. My hand found the hanging chain instead. It dangled from the track overhead, a metal loop ending in a cord I could pull to disengage the opener. The links were cold, small, and rough against my fingers. I took a breath, braced myself, and tugged. The chain clinked once against the metal casing above. The disengage mechanism gave a dull, mechanical clack that echoed off the bare walls louder than it had any right to. I winced. Then I wrapped both hands around the lower bar of the garage door and lifted. The first inch fought me. The seal between the door and the floor had been sitting there for years, shut most nights, pressed tight by gravity and time. It protested with a sticky, sucking sound, like old tape peeling away from glass. Then, with a reluctant groan, the whole thing lurched upward. Metal scraped metal as the rollers jumped in their tracks, sending a bone-deep screech through the garage. Each bracket and hinge added its own complaint, a cacophony of grinding and rattling that might as well have been a fire alarm. I bit down on a curse, eyes squeezed shut, arms straining. The door rose inch by inch, heavy and uneven. Every link in the disengaged chain above me rattled, chiming against its housing with high, betraying notes. Outside, as the bottom of the door cleared the seal, The storm's voice burst in unobstructed. Rain hammered the driveway a few feet away, loud and immediate. Wind shoved its way under the rising panel, slapping at my bare legs and chest, cold and insistent. Thunder rumbled practically overhead now, the thin metal roof amplifying it into something that felt like it was happening inside the garage rather than beyond it. I hauled the door up to about halfway, just enough room to duck under if I committed. Any higher and the screeching got worse, and my arms were already shaking. I stopped there, chest heaving, ears ringing from the noise I had just made. In the sudden relative quiet that followed, I heard something that made my stomach drop clean through me. His voice, not from far away, not shouting from the bedroom. From inside the house, maybe 1 or 2 rooms away, threaded through the laundry room door crack and the seams around its frame, out into the garage air. If you run out there, you're just running into the storm, man. He did not yell it. He did not sound winded. He said it in that same too casual tone he had used at my front door. The same cadence he had used when he asked if I was gaming in here. Almost conversational, almost helpful. Like a neighbor standing in his own garage, watching you struggle with a stuck door and offering a piece of fatherly advice about weather. The words echoed strangely in the half-empty space of my garage. They bounced off the car, the workbench, the boxes, and came back at me with a slight delay, turning one quiet sentence into a chorus that did not quite line up. If you run out there, just running into the storm, man. Storm, man. The fact that he knew what I was doing, that he could map my choices that accurately, crushed any last illusion that this was random. He had heard the door. Of course he had. He had heard the chain rattle, the metal grind, the storm rush in. From wherever he was in my house, he had put those sounds together and drawn a straight line to my fear. He was not crashing blindly through rooms. He was listening, tracking, playing. For a heartbeat, I pictured him standing in my hallway with his head tilted, smiling a little, talking just loud enough for his voice to carry, but not loud enough to draw attention from anyone outside who might still have power, still have their lights on, still be blissfully ignorant of the fact that my quiet little ranch house was no longer empty. The rain beyond the half-open garage door seemed to intensify in response, sheets of water slanting in at an angle that sprayed my shins. Wind pushed harder, rocking the door slightly in its tracks, making the metal rattle and whine as if it wanted to drop back down. Every instinct I had tore in 2 directions. Forward, into the storm, where at least the danger was honest and visible. Back, through the laundry room, past the man who spoke like he already understood how this night ended. I stood there with one hand still braced on the trembling garage door, the other hanging useless at my side, heart pounding in my ears, the storm roaring in front of me and his too casual warning drifting in from behind, and realized I was no longer choosing between inside and outside. I was choosing between 2 versions of being hunted. 6.1. The sprint across the cul-de-sac. There is a line where fear stops negotiating and just jumps. His little comment about running into the storm shoved me right over it. I stood there in the garage with the half-open door trembling above me, wind coughing sheets of rain inside, his words curling through the air like cigarette smoke. And something inside me finally snapped out of its paralysis. Inside meant him. Outside meant everything else. I dropped. Concrete slammed into my knees and forearms, cold biting up through skin that had been warm seconds before. I flattened myself onto my stomach and felt the rough floor scrape against my hoodie and bare chest as I shimmied forward. The bottom edge of the garage door hovered what felt like an inch above my spine. In reality, it was probably a foot, but in that moment, any gap feels too small when you picture heavy metal slamming down. The underside of the door whispered over my back, damp and gritty. I sucked my stomach in, pressed my chin to the concrete, and dragged myself past the threshold like some desperate animal squeezing under a fence. Something sharp on the floor, maybe a small stone, maybe a fragment of leaf stem, scraped along my shoulder blade, leaving a hot, stinging line. For one awful second, I imagined his hand closing around my ankle and yanking me backward into the dark. Nothing grabbed me. Then I was out. The storm hit me like a physical thing. Rain did not just fall. It assaulted. Cold sheets pummeled my back, my neck, the side of my face, instantly soaking my hoodie and shorts. The air was colder by several degrees, a slap in the lungs. The wind shoved at me from the left, throwing drops sideways so hard they stung. The driveway under me was slick and hard. I pushed up to my feet, shoes forgotten, toes skidding for a heartbeat before finding enough friction to hold. My back screamed a dull protest where the concrete had scraped it, but adrenaline drowned most of it out. My car loomed to my right, a dark, familiar shape made foreign by the chaotic light, its roof and windshield blurred by the river of water running down them. The street beyond it was a slick black ribbon, reflecting the weak halo of the cul-de-sac's streetlight. Everything else was motion and noise. Thunder cracked overhead, so close it felt like it hit the hood of my car. The sound slammed through my chest and bounced between the houses. For a second, the whole cul-de-sac lit up in strobed white. My house, the vacant one at the end, the squat shapes of the neighbors' places circling the loop, and directly opposite my driveway, Carl and Denise's house. Their red pickup sat in the driveway, beads of water crawling down its sides like ants. The familiar porch light over their front door glowed a dull, comforting yellow, cutting a small circle out of the chaos. That light was the only thing in the world that looked steady. I ran. Bare feet slapping the driveway, slap, 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 the concrete shocking up through my soles with every impact. I cut across the grass strip between my driveway and the street. The lawn turned into something halfway between mud and sponge. My toes dug into it and slipped, sending cold water up my calves. I stumbled off the curb wrong, and my ankle rolled just enough to make my vision blur for a second. But I kept going. The asphalt of the street was slick and uneven, water pooling in shallow dips. Each step sent little sprays outward, catching the streetlight in dull flashes. My lungs burned. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it was trying to punch its way out through my throat. Every inhale dragged storm-cold air into chest that was built for warehouse work and couch gaming, not sprinting at midnight in a thunderstorm. If he stepped out of my front door right then, if he walked down my driveway and into the street, he would see my back turned to him. My whole stupid, exposed body lit up every time lightning fired across the sky. Thunder rumbled again, longer this time, rolling away into the distance as I reached the opposite curb. I could feel the grit of the street under my soles now, a mix of sand, pebbles, whatever else the rain had not washed away. The red pickup grew larger to my right. I could see water running in little rivers along its bed cover, pouring off the tailgate in a steady drip. Their living room window glowed faintly, a rectangle of softer yellow behind closed curtains. A TV flickered in there, coloring the curtains with shifting blue-white light, a life still in progress. I hit their front walk and nearly slid, catching myself with one hand against the vinyl siding. The impact sent a jolt up my arm, but it kept me upright. I staggered up the concrete steps to their porch, water streaming off me. For half a second, I had this sick panic that their porch light would snap off too, that the house would go dark and everything would close in. It did not. The bulb stayed solid, illuminating the rain swirling just beyond the small overhang and the white of their front door. I slammed my fist against it. The sound was a flat, heavy thud, barely audible over the storm, but the impact felt good, real. My knuckles stung. I hit it again, harder. "Carl," I shouted, voice cracking. "It's me, from across the street! Someone's in my house!" My words came out too loud, too high. The storm grabbed them and tore pieces away, but enough made it to the wood, to whatever ears were on the other side. From inside, I heard chaos wake up. A dog barked. Copper, their aging mutt with his stubby legs and deep, surprisingly serious bark. His claws scrabbled frantically on hardwood, the sound a frantic skitter under his booming alarm. "Copper, hey, hey!" A familiar male voice tried to calm him, muffled by the door. I pounded again, each slam of my fist syncing with a flash of lightning and an answering bark. "Please, it's an emergency!" The chain on the other side rattled. The deadbolt thudded. The door jerked inward a couple of inches, Copper's snout immediately pushing into the gap, hot breath and dog hair hitting my soaked legs. Then the door opened fully. Carl filled the frame, late 50s, thick around the middle, gray hair mashed messily on one side from sleep. He was wearing plaid pajama pants and a t-shirt with some faded fishing logo on it. In his right hand, angled down but ready, was a heavy Maglite flashlight. The old metal kind that doubles as a club if you need it. Its beam was not on yet, but just seeing it in his fist belonged to a different world. A world where trouble is something you step out to check on with a neighbor, not something that walks in through your back door. "Jesus, kid," he said, eyes going wide at the sight of me, soaked, barefoot, shaking. "What the hell?" "Someone's in my house," I gasped, cutting him off. My voice shook. "He came in the back. Power's out. He was at my doors. He's inside right now." The words tumbled out disjointed, stacking on top of each other. Denise appeared over Carl's shoulder, tying a robe around her waist with quick, jerky movements. Her hair was a mess of sleep-flattened curls, and her face went from irritation at Copper's barking to pure alarm when she saw me. "Oh my God," she breathed. Come in, you're freezing." She grabbed my arm and tugged. I stepped over the threshold, Copper circling my legs in tight loops, barking toward the open storm behind me. The warmth of their house hit me like a different kind of wave. The entryway mat swallowed some of the water dripping off me, but not enough. Little rivers ran from my shorts and sleeves, spreading into darker patches on their hardwood. Carl slammed the door behind me. The sound of it closing, solid wood hitting frame, deadbolt sliding home, cut the roar of the storm in half. For the first time since the lights went out, I was behind a door with other people. Inside, the soundscape shifted again. The storm was now a dull, constant rumble behind the walls, padded by insulation and drywall. Carl and Denise's TV murmured from the living room. A low buzz of canned laughter and dialogue turned down when they got up, now barely audible under Copper's still nervous barking. Hey, Copper, enough!" Carl barked, voice firm, and the dog eventually quieted to a series of grumbles, eyes still fixed on the door I had just come through. "You're shaking," Denise said, her hand still on my arm. I realized my teeth were chattering, not just from cold, but from the adrenaline dumping out of my system now that I was no longer alone. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. "He's still in there." I turned toward their front window out of reflex, looking back across the cul-de-sac. Through the sheer curtain, I could see my house, a dark rectangle across the wet street. No lights, no movement. Just a shadow against heavier shadows. Somewhere in there, a man was standing in my hallway or my bedroom or my living room, in air that still held my own warmth from an hour before. My heart tried to climb back up my throat. Carl followed my gaze, his jaw tightening. "All right," he said, maglite shifting in his grip. "You're inside. That's good. Denise, call 911. Tell them we've got a break-in across the street during a power outage." Denise nodded, already reaching for the landline phone on the small table by the stairs. An actual landline, one of those old habits from an older generation that suddenly made perfect sense. As she dialed, the storm outside chose that moment to give the house a full-body shudder, thunder cracking close enough to rattle the entryway mirror. Copper barked once, deeply, then fell silent again, ears pricked. I stood there dripping on their mat, listening to Denise's voice speak my address and the words "intruder" and "inside right now," while Carl's hand flexed around the heavy flashlight and Copper stared at the door like he expected it to come to him. My own house, just across the slick curve of the cul-de-sac, stayed dark and quiet. Too quiet, given how much I now knew was moving around inside it. 6.2. Waiting for the police. If hell has an antechamber, it probably feels a lot like a warm neighbor's house when your own is across the street with a stranger inside it. Carl and Denise's place was everything mine was not in that moment. Warm, lit, lived in. The entryway opened into a small living room with a soft yellow lamp glowing on an end table. The TV in the corner was tuned to local news, some anchor's mouth moving silently over looping footage of weather maps and traffic cams. The volume had been muted the second Denise picked up the phone, so the only sound from it was the faint electric hum of electronics still having power. The air in their house smelled like leftover soup and clean laundry, a comforting mix of chicken broth, herbs, and dryer sheets. Somewhere down the hallway, I could hear the low whir of a running dishwasher and the rhythmic thump of their dryer tumbling a half load. It should have felt safe. I stood there in the warm pool by the door, soaked through, water dripping off my hoodie and shorts onto their mat. The sudden heat made the cold in my bones ache worse. My skin prickled as feeling fought its way back into my fingers and toes. Denise had the landline phone cradled between her shoulder and ear, one arm across her chest, the other gripping the cord like it might float away without her. She had already given them the basics while I was still catching my breath. "Yes, our neighbor just came over," she was saying, voice calm but tight. "He says there's someone in his house right now. He ran here barefoot in the storm. No, he doesn't think it's family." I could hear the dispatcher on the other end, a tinny, professional voice bleeding faintly out of the handset speaker. The words were indistinct from where I stood, just the rhythm of questions and practiced responses. Carl had moved to the front window. He hooked a finger around the edge of the curtain and pulled it back just enough to peek through. Copper sat planted at his feet, hackles slightly up, head pointed at the door, but eyes flicking toward the street whenever lightning flashed. "You okay, kid?" Carl asked without turning all the way around. I swallowed. I don't know. It sounded stupid as soon as it left my mouth, but it was the only true thing I had. My body still shook in little stuttering bursts, part cold, part adrenaline refusing to drain. My heart had not decided it could slow down yet. Every sound made my shoulders flinch, even the perfectly normal ones. Denise shifting her weight, Copper's claws tapping the floor as he readjusted, the dishwasher knocking gently as a plate inside clinked. "Can you tell them what happened?" Denise asked, handing the phone toward me. "Well, they want to know what you saw." I took it, the plastic warm from her hand. The dispatcher's voice sharpened in my ear immediately. "Hi," she said, steady and clipped. "This is 911. I understand you believe someone is inside your residence?" The question was so clean, so reasonable. It made everything I had just lived through sound ridiculous before I even opened my mouth. "Yeah," I said, my own voice shaking. "Yeah, someone came to my front door first. He said his car died, asked to use my phone. Then my ring went offline. The power went out. I heard the chime again, even though there was no power, and I saw someone outside my front window when the lightning hit. I heard myself and wanted to flinch away. The words tumbled over each other, half-formed and too fast. The dispatcher did not react, at least not in a way I could hear. "Okay. Did you see a weapon?" "No," I said. I saw his shape. Outside. Later I went to the back, and he was at my back door. I saw his head and shoulders through the glass when the lightning went off. He kept saying he knew I was home, that he heard me earlier. He came in through my back door when the power was out. I heard him come in." "Did you lock your doors?" she asked. "I thought I did," I said. The shame in that answer stung. "The back one, I don't know. I don't remember hearing it latch earlier." "Okay," she said again, that word doing a lot of heavy lifting. "You're across the street now with neighbors, correct?" "Yeah." "Anyone else inside your home?" "Just him," I said. Saying it out loud made my stomach twist. "I live alone." "All right," she replied. "Officers are on their way. The storm's slowing the response a bit, but they are en route. I need you to stay inside. Do not go back over there, and do not confront anyone you see outside. You're safe where you are, okay?" Safe. Another word that sounded nice but felt wrong. "Okay," I said anyway, because there was nothing else to say. We went through the address again. My name, basic details. I repeated the parts about the voice, the footsteps in my hallway, the way he had talked like he knew me. I left out the line about him calling me Dad. It sounded too insane even in my own head, like I would have to explain my father's grave to some stranger on a phone line. When I hung up, my hand felt numb. Denise took the phone back and set it down on the little table like it might ring again any second. Her knuckles were as white as mine felt. "What did they say?" Carl asked, still at the window. "They're sending someone," I said. My voice came out thinner now, the adrenaline drain leaving it drab. "They said to stay put." He grunted, watching the street. I moved closer, the wet fabric of my hoodie clinging to my shoulders, and peered through the small gap beside him. The cul-de-sac looked like a photograph someone had desaturated and blurred. Rain still came down in slanted lines, bouncing off the asphalt and running toward the storm drains. The streetlight in the loop's center cast its feeble cone of orange over the glossy pavement, making it look almost molten. My house sat directly opposite, a dark rectangle with its porch light dead, its windows black. I could see the faint outline of my garage door still half open like a crooked jaw. Every time lightning flashed, it lit up the wet face of my siding and the watery gleam of my driveway, but nothing moved. What chilled me more than that stillness was what was not there. The dark sedan I had noticed earlier, parked weirdly along the side of the street when I drove home. Gone. No taillights, no vague outline, no shape at the curb. "Street's empty," Carl said quietly, like he was narrating his own observation for both of us. "Looks like everybody went to bed or lost their power." He let the curtain fall back into place for a second, then hooked it again, unwilling to stop watching. The houses around the loop were mostly dark too. One had a soft light in an upstairs window, a hallway, maybe a bathroom, but no silhouettes crossed it. No one stepped out onto their porches to smoke or check the rain. The vacant house at the end of the street hunched under the storm, its overgrown yard beating with water. It struck me, standing there in someone else's safe, warm living room, that the world outside looked weirdly hollow. Not just quiet, lifeless. Like if you walked too far past the edges of Carl and Denise's front yard, you might find out that nothing else existed beyond what the streetlight touched. Just blackness and rain, and somewhere in it, the shape of my house with its door cracked open and a man inside who knew how to say the right words. My brain kept trying to backfill the missing sedan. Maybe its owner moved it. Maybe it had never been as strange as I'd thought. Maybe it was always just some neighbor's family car, and my fear had turned it into something more. But it leaving between the time I last saw it and now, between the impossible chime, the man at my back door, and my sprint through the storm, made my skin crawl. Denise touched my arm again, gently this time. "They'll be here soon," she said. "You did the right thing coming over." I nodded, but my eyes were still on that gap in the curtain. Lightning flared again, washing the street in white for a heartbeat. My house did not move. Nothing on the porch, no figure in the yard. Just a dark box sitting there like a mouth that had already swallowed something and was quietly working on it in the dark. 6.3. The empty house. And the question they asked. You can hear a police car before you see it, especially on a wet night. The low rumble of the engine, the wet hiss of tires on slick asphalt, the faint whine of a fan inside. Then the lights hit. Two cruisers rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, red and blue strobes washing over the wet pavement and bouncing up onto siding and windows. The whole street went from dead gray to pulsing neon. My house, Carl and Denise's, even the vacant place at the end of the loop breathing in those colors like something out of a crime show instead of my actual life. Carl let the curtain fall and stepped back, then went to the door. I hovered behind him, heart climbing again. When he opened the door, the storm rushed in as a cool mist, along with the staccato flashes reflecting off the red pickup's wet hood. Two officers were already halfway up our walk, one tall and thin, the other stockier, both in dark, rain-slicked jackets, radios hissing softly on their shoulders. "You the caller?" the taller one said, eyes flicking between Carl and me. "That's him," Carl said, nodding at me. "He's the one from across the street." I stepped forward, suddenly aware of my bare feet again on their mat. "Yeah, it's my place over there." The shorter officer's gaze went past me, out to the cul-de-sac. He squinted through the rain toward my dark house. "All right, we've got units here. We're gonna clear your residence. You stay put for now." "Back door's where he came in," I blurted. "Kitchen. I heard him walking in the hall in my room. We'll take a look," the tall one cut in, not unkindly. "What's your name?" I gave it. He repeated it into his radio, followed by my address, his voice blending with the crackle of other calls and codes I could not parse. Then they were gone from the doorway, moving back into the rain, boots slapping the walkway, mag lights in hand now, beams already cutting through the storm. Carl and I went back to the front window like kids at a parade. Denise hovered behind us, one hand on Copper's collar, the other pressed flat to her chest. Across the street, my house looked even smaller under the harsh, strobed light. The cruiser's beams painted the siding in alternating bands of blue and red, making it look like it was breathing. The officers approached my front step with the solid, practiced movements of people who have done this before. One's flashlight beam swept across the porch, across my dark front window, across the doorframe. The other stood slightly back and to the side as the first tested the knob, then opened the door and stepped in, announcing their presence in a firm voice that barely reached us over the storm. I caught fragments. Police department. If anyone's inside, before the door closed behind them, then we waited. Time stretched out, punctuated by thunder and the occasional crackle of a radio. The red and blue lights kept spinning, reflecting in our window, making everything inside Carl and Denise's living room flicker. The framed family photos, the TV screen, the shine on Copper's eyes. Every so often, we saw a flashlight arc past one of my windows. Living room, then hallway, then faintly through the bedroom curtains. Shadows moved behind the blinds. At one point, I saw the beam sweep across the small frosted pane of the back door, turning it into a dim square of white for a second. My stomach clenched for reasons I could not fully name. 15 minutes feels like an hour when your house is being searched without you in it. At some point, the storm eased off a little. The rain went from sheets to a steadier patter, thunder retreating farther down the interstate. The cruiser lights looked even harsher without the rain curtain to diffuse them. Finally, the front door of my house opened again. One of the officers stepped out, talking into his radio. The other followed, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. They conferred briefly in my driveway, their silhouettes outlined in strobing light. Then the taller one headed back across the street toward us. Carl opened the door before he could knock. "Well?" he asked. I held my breath. "We didn't find anyone inside," the officer said. His hair was plastered to his forehead now, his jacket dripping. Up close, I could see their boots and pant legs were wet almost to the knee. Back doors partially open. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no pry marks on windows, just some wet footprints on the floor near the kitchen. "Footprints," I repeated, the word landing heavy. He nodded. "Hard to tell what's what with the storm. Some of it's yours, some not. Floor's damp around the back. We'll document it, but there's nobody in there now." The relief I felt was not clean. It came twisted with something else. Confusion, disbelief, the sense that a magic trick had just been pulled, and I'd missed the sleight of hand. "Can I go in?" I asked. "We'll walk you through," he said. "You might want to grab some shoes, though." Carl disappeared for a second and came back with a pair of old sneakers he kept by the door for yard work. They were a half size big, but at that point, I would have worn anything. Crossing the street back toward my house, under the dying storm and the still spinning lights, felt like walking into a crime scene and a bad dream at the same time. Inside, the air was colder than Carl and Denise's, but it felt weirdly stale, like the house had been holding its breath. The candle in the kitchen had burned down to a stub. Its flame was tiny, struggling, the wax almost level with the lip of the jar. It threw just enough light to give everything a sickly yellow cast. The vanilla smell was faint now, overpowered by wet air and the faint tang of mud. On the laminate near the back door, they had been right. A constellation of smudges. Some were unmistakably mine, Bare feet, partial prints leading from the kitchen toward the hall, toward the laundry room. But overlaid on those, intersecting and diverging, were others. Shoe prints. Not sharp enough to pick out a specific tread, but definitely not bare. Darker, narrower ovals, damp with whatever the intruder had tracked in. They led from the back door inward, then faded where the laminate met the living room carpet, only to appear again, faintly, on the other side, heading back toward the hallway that led to my bedroom. It looked horribly like he had changed his mind mid-path, as if he had started toward the living room, then turned, retracing steps in the direction of the rooms I had been hiding near. "See?" I said quietly, more to myself than to them. "He was in here." "We believe you," the stockier officer said. He was sweeping his flashlight beam carefully along the floor, the walls, the back door frame. "There's evidence someone came in through here. No question." The taller one stood a little apart from us, near the edge of the living room, taking it in with that slow, cop gaze that seems to weigh everything at once. After a moment, he stepped closer to me and lowered his voice. "Did you tell this guy your name?" he asked. "Or anything about yourself when he first knocked?" "No," I said. I asked, 'Who is it?' from behind the door. I never opened it." He nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. "Because you know he didn't ask, 'Is anyone home?' right? You mentioned that on the call." He said, "I know you're home. I heard you." He let that sit there, words matching the ones in my memory too precisely. "He came to your door already assuming someone was in here," he finished. I had not put it together that way, not fully. Hearing it said back to me made my chest feel tight. "He might have been watching the house earlier," the other officer added. "Or just picking likely targets. Dark street, single story, no dog." He shrugged one shoulder, but there was no comfort in it. "We'll do extra patrols tonight. You shouldn't stay here alone if you don't want to." Before I could answer, the lights flickered. It was quick, a stutter in the darkness, like the whole house blinked. The dead TV in the living room flashed its brand logo for a second, before settling into standby. The digital clock on the stove in the kitchen came back to life, zeros blinking. Somewhere in the guts of the house, the fridge kicked back on with a low hum. The power had come back. One of the officers muttered something into his radio about restoration on our block. I barely heard him. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was such a normal sound, it almost made me laugh. I pulled it out with hands that still did not feel entirely steady. A new notification had popped up over my home screen. "Ring, motion detected at your front door." The timestamp was fresh. A few minutes ago, while I had been standing in Carl and Denise's living room, watching cruisers pull up to my dark house. My throat went dry. "The camera just came back online," I said. There's a new clip." Both officers looked at me. "Can we see it?" the taller one asked. I tapped the notification. The app opened, no more red offline banner, just the familiar timeline. The newest event sat at the top, front door, motion, time, with the little play icon. My thumb hovered for a second, then pressed. The video loaded, a second or two of spinning, then the image snapped into place. Black. Not total black, more like deep gray, a faint, grainy texture, but no porch, no street, no rail. The display said it was my front door camera, but it felt like someone had put their thumb over the lens or turned it toward an empty wall. The only sound was steady rain, close to the mic. Each drop a soft patter over compressed audio. No voices, no footsteps, just water. "Skip ahead," the stockier officer said quietly. I dragged the tiny slider forward with a fingertip. The rain continued, unbothered. Near the end of the clip, just before it cut off, something else bled through. A sound that was not the storm, soft, low, almost amused. A chuckle. Not loud, not forced. The kind of quiet laugh someone lets slip when they are pleased with themselves and no one else is supposed to hear. The hairs on my arms stood up so fast it hurt. "That him?" one of the officers asked. I swallowed. I've never heard that laugh before. It did not sound like me. It did not sound like Carl or any neighbor I knew. It did not match the slightly rough, casual voice that had spoken through my doors, but it carried the same attitude, like someone enjoying their own private joke. The clip ended. The screen popped back to the timeline. I looked up, out my still dark living room window, and noticed something else that made my stomach twist. In the video, the porch light above my front door was off. The frame, as useless as it was, at least told me that much. The small circle where the light should have spilled onto the steps was just more dark. But right now, outside the real window, that same porch light was glowing. Not flickering, not coming back on, just steady, as if it had been that way all along. 7.1. Aftermath and moving upstairs. The thing about a night like that is, it does end. That is the worst part. The storm moves on. The police leave. The neighbors go back to their shows and their dishes and their laundry. You brush your teeth. You turn off a lamp. You lie down. And if anyone looked in from the street, they would say, "See? Everything is back to normal." For a few days after it happened, I tried very hard to pretend they were right. The officers filed their report as possible attempted burglary. No suspect identified. No clear description, just adult male, mid-30s, average build, unknown clothing, unknown direction of travel. The ring clip had been useless to them. Too dark, nothing visible, just the rain and that half-laugh near the end. They told me it might have been a faulty camera reacting to power fluctuations. They told me they would add extra patrols to the area for a while. They told me to install more cameras if I could. Upgrade my locks. Leave a light on at night. "Criminals don't like visibility," one of them said, handing me a little printed sheet about home security. "The more lit and busy a place looks, the less likely they'll pick it." Busy. My dead-end street with the vacant house at the end and the motion sensor porch lights didn't exactly qualify. The day after, when the sky was a clean blue like nothing bad had ever happened under it, I walked through my house with the sun slanting in and saw the night in every corner. The laminate in the kitchen had dried, but the darker patches from the prints were still there. Faint stains where wet soles had pressed dirt into the seams. I mop-cleaned that floor 3 times, once hard enough that my shoulders ached, and still, in certain light, I swore I could see a discoloration where his steps had overlapped mine. My bare footprints had vanished beneath the chemical clean. His seemed to hang on an extra day, like residue. The back door stuck more now when I opened it, swollen from the humidity and abuse. Every time it groaned, my throat tightened. The frosted glass stayed just as cloudy, just as blank, but the memory of that lightning-lit silhouette would come back in a flash so vivid I felt my skin go cold, even with the sun on my face. For the first week, I barely slept. I would lie on my bed, same mattress he had maybe sat on, same room where he had walked around while I hid, staring at the ceiling fan and listening to the house breathe. Every creak was a footstep. Every pop of cooling drywall was someone leaning against the wall just outside my door. The fridge cycling on sounded like a door opening. The AC click-off might as well have been a light switch in someone else's hand. I started leaving the bedroom door open a crack so I could see the sliver of hallway beyond. I told myself it was so I would not be surprised by anything. Really, it was because closing it all the way made the room feel like the laundry box all over again. In the evenings, when the sky dimmed and the houses across the street lit up one by one, I found myself sitting on the couch with the TV on and the volume lower than usual, just so I could hear the tiniest change in the house underneath it. Every doorbell sound on TV made me jump. Every delivery truck that rumbled down the main road 2 streets over made me look at my own front window, expecting the chime, the knock, the casual, "Hey man," through the door. Packages from Amazon and UPS suddenly felt like landmines. When my phone buzzed with a "Your order has been delivered" notification, I would sit there and stare at the Ring app for a full minute before opening the live view. Sometimes it connected right away and showed me a clean view of my porch. Box on the mat, empty street, nothing else. Sometimes it hung for a few seconds, the little spinning wheel taking too long, and the flat red memory of device offline would flare in the back of my mind. When the image finally popped up, clear as always, I would feel this weird, petty anger at a device that had gone dark exactly when I needed it most. I stopped using the back door. For a while, I told myself it was temporary, just until I could afford a better lock, maybe another camera aimed at the driveway. Then it turned into habit. Groceries came in through the front now. Laundry too. I would park in the driveway, walk around the car in the rain, and haul everything up the front steps like an idiot, rather than put my hand on that back doorknob. If I did have to go near it, for trash, for the mower, for anything, I would feel my heart rate pick up as soon as I stepped into the kitchen. My eyes would flick to the frosted pane and check, automatically, that there was nothing on the other side. I knew I would not see anything, not unless another storm hit at the perfect angle again. Knowing did not help. Carl and Denise checked in on me more for a while. Carl would wave me over if he saw me at my mailbox and ask, "You holding up all right?" in that neighborly tone that sounded almost casual, but did not quite make it. Denise baked me something once, some kind of banana bread, left it on my porch with a little sticky note that said, "Glad you're okay," and a smiley face. I was grateful. I was also embarrassed by how jumpy I was, because on paper, nothing had actually happened. He had not touched me. He had not broken anything. He had walked into my house, walked around in my rooms, said a few things, and left. The report lived in the system as a line item. Possible attempted burglary, no suspect, no injury. It did not have a field for laughed into the camera after the fact or spoke like he was rehearsing a part. Called me dad in my own hallway. After a couple of months, the edges dulled. I could get through a whole shift at the warehouse without checking my ring feed on breaks. I stopped waking up at every single noise. But the changes in my routines stuck. I started leaving 1 or 2 lights on when I left for work, even if it meant a higher bill. The glow through the front window made me feel like I was walking back up to a place that had not been completely empty all day. I would lock the front door, test it twice, then walk away and come back to yank on it again, just to feel the solid resistance. Sometimes I did that 3 times before my brain would let me go. On storm nights, I did not sit under the awning to watch the rain anymore. I shut the blinds, turned up the volume on whatever I was watching, and tried hard not to think about how thunder could swallow other sounds if someone walked up my path. When my lease came up for renewal, the decision to move felt less like a decision and more like gravity. The landlord sent the usual email, "Let us know if you plan to renew for another year," and my hand hovered over the keyboard for about 3 seconds before I closed the message and opened up a rental site instead. I found a second-floor apartment complex closer to the city, off a busier road near a strip of chain restaurants and a grocery store. It was not fancy, thin walls, dated appliances, but it had something my little ranch house never would. Elevation and shared walls. People above, people below, people walking past outside my door all the time. Noise. I signed the new lease without really thinking about the fact that noise had been the exact thing that had betrayed me in the first place. Moving out of the ranch was stranger than I expected. Packing my stuff into cardboard boxes that looked a lot like the ones in the garage made me feel like I was erasing myself from a crime scene. On the last day, I walked through each room one more time. The living room, where my console still sat under the TV, exactly where it had been the night everything went dark. The hallway, which now seemed too narrow, too easy to cover in a few steps. The bedroom, where the mattress looked small and a little sad without the sheets. The kitchen. The back door. I made myself go to it, my hand on the knob, blood buzzing in my ears. I opened it one last time and stepped out into the driveway. The day was bright and completely ordinary. Cars passed on the main road. A lawnmower droned somewhere nearby. The frosted pane showed nothing when I looked back at it from outside, just my own shape blurred and broken. I took the Ring doorbell off the front and dropped it in a moving box. But when I unpacked in the new place, it stayed there, buried under cables and old game cases. My new building had its own buzzer system, an ancient intercom by the lobby door that let out a harsh buzz when someone pressed my apartment number. I learned to hate that sound too. Upstairs, in my second-floor unit, I could hear everything. The upstairs neighbor's footsteps, the downstairs neighbor's TV, kids running in the hallway. The AC made different noises here. The fridge had a higher hum. The pipes rattled in new ways. I mapped them over time, added them to the catalog in my head. I told myself the shared walls made me safer. I told myself someone would hear if anything went wrong this time. But at night, when the building settled and all the machines synced up and there was that one weird second when everything cut out, the AC between cycles, the fridge paused, the upstairs TV finally off, I would find myself holding my breath, listening, waiting. Not for thunder, not for a knock, for the echo of a chime that was not there anymore, in a house I no longer lived in, that my brain still insisted on replaying like a sound file it did not know how to delete. 7.2, Storms. In the new place. The new apartment was louder in all the ordinary ways and quieter in all the ways that mattered. Thin walls meant I learned my neighbors' routines before I ever saw their faces. The guy on my left liked sports talk radio at weird hours. The muffled rise and fall of angry hosts leaked through the drywall. The couple on my right had at least one small kid whose footsteps ran back and forth in frantic bursts. A tiny stampede overhead when they visited the upstairs neighbors. Somebody 2 doors down had a laugh that came in sharp, barking bursts during sitcom nights. The AC unit under my bedroom window rattled like it was held together by stubbornness alone. When it kicked on, it made the glass buzz in its frame. The fridge in the cramped kitchen hummed loud enough that the cabinet beside it vibrated. Cheap plates inside clinked softly against each other whenever the compressor cycled. Noise here was constant. It should have been comforting, proof that other people were close. The building breathed, coughed, muttered. Pipes groaned in the walls when someone showered upstairs. The lobby door downstairs slammed just so when delivery drivers came and went. I told myself that if anything happened this time, if anyone tried a door or walked where they shouldn't, someone besides me would hear it. The first big storm in the new place arrived about a month after I moved in. It was one of those Ohio summer storms that sneaks up fast. One minute, the sky over the city was bright and washed out, the sun smearing pale light over the parking lot and the strip of chain restaurants down the road. The next, the clouds rolled in heavy and low, turning the sky that weird greenish gray that always makes you think tornado, even if you know it's just a squall line. From my second-floor balcony, I had a pretty good view. The complex wrapped around a central parking lot like a squared-off horseshoe. 2 stories of beige siding, cheap railings, satellite dishes sprouting off corners. Beyond that, power lines cut across the street toward a grocery store sign that flickered sometimes even on clear nights. That evening, the wind shifted all at once. The trees by the lot bowed as if something had leaned on them. Trash bags and loose receipts skittered across the asphalt like they were trying to find cover. Then the lightning started. It did not hit the ground at first. It stayed up in the clouds, crawling horizontally, branching like the veins on the back of a hand. The flashes lit the undersides of the storm in pulses, turning the greenish gray into a bruised purple for a second at a time. Thunder rolled in after each flare, sometimes close enough to rattle the balcony railing under my hands, sometimes far enough away that it felt like background noise. The first heavy drops of rain hit the complex roof and the cars below with audible pops. I stood there, under the small overhang, watching. Up here, on the second floor, the storm felt more like a show and less like something that could reach into my house and rearrange my life. There was no porch at eye level for anyone to stand on and talk to me through a door, no frosted glass panel inches from my face. To get to me now, someone would have to go through a lobby door, up a set of stairs, past at least 3 other units. Elevation and shared walls, the 2 things I had wanted. I leaned against the balcony rail and let the rain's first spray blow in under the overhang, speckling my forearms with cold dots. Lightning forked between clouds again, never quite touching down. The neighboring building's windows glowed like little aquariums, rectangles of yellow and blue and white, each one holding a different scene. Someone at a sink, someone pacing with a phone, someone's TV painting their walls with moving color. From inside my own unit, the AC unit under the window rattled to life, adding its mechanical growl to the storm's soundtrack. The fridge in the kitchen kicked in, its hum climbing up through the floor and into my bones. For a few minutes, I almost felt detached from the version of myself who had crawled under a garage door barefoot. Up here, cars moved along the main road like beetles with their shells lit up red and white. The grocery store sign buzzed faintly in the wet air, its neon flicker barely visible through the falling rain. Power lines sang their low, constant song as the storm charged the air around them. I went back inside when the rain turned from first curtain to full drop, wide sheets slamming into the balcony hard enough to ricochet onto the sliding door glass. I locked it out of habit, even though the latch was flimsy and a determined tug could probably rip it open. Inside, the apartment felt smaller, but not claustrophobic yet. I double-checked the front door deadbolt before I even realized I was doing it. Turn, click. Then my hand did it again, just to feel the resistance. I had installed an extra security bar myself, one of those cheap metal rods that wedged under the knob and braced against the floor. It probably would not stop a truly determined person, but it was another layer, another sound I would hear if anyone tried. Shoes went by the door, laces already loosened. Not because I was neat, but because I knew I could step into them fast if I had to run again. My phone sat charging on the little table by the couch, the cord always plugged in now if I was home. Battery at 98%. Flashlight app pulled up with 2 quick taps. I had practiced that motion enough that it felt like muscle memory. Outside, the storm ramped up. Rain hammered the balcony and the roof in a steady assault. Lightning strobed more often now, sometimes bright enough to steal the color from my living room for a heartbeat. The AC unit roared. The fridge hummed. Someone upstairs dropped something heavy. It hit the floor with a dull, domestic thud. I put some mindless show on TV just to have faces and voices in the room with me. The canned laughter felt wrong under the storm, but silence felt worse. As the night settled, I became more aware of a sound that had been there since I moved in, but that I was only now really listening for. The gap. Every machine has a rhythm. The AC under the window ran hard for a while, rattling and hissing, then cut off with a clunk when it hit its temperature. The fridge hummed in long stretches, then fell quiet when the compressor took a break. The upstairs neighbor's TV murmured until it clicked off. Their footsteps trailed away toward bed. The building's plumbing coughed and sighed when someone flushed or showered, then went still. And every so often, by pure chance or some bad alignment of cycles, all of those noises would line up on their brakes. The AC would shut down. The fridge would stop. The upstairs TV would go quiet. No one in the hallway, no doors closing, no pipes knocking. The storm outside, if it was between thunder rolls and in a lighter phase of rain, would drop its volume just enough. And for 1 second, maybe less, maybe more, but it always felt like exactly one. Everything would fall into a weird, pressured silence. The absence of sound had a weight to it, like the building had sucked in a breath and forgotten to let it out. The first time I noticed it in the new place, I was sitting on the couch with my feet up, watching lightning flicker behind the curtains. The AC cut off with its usual clunk. The fridge cycled down, and in that micro gap before rain and distant traffic filled the edges, the world went flat. My lungs stopped on their own. A familiar, stupid instinct crawled up my spine. Listen. Something's coming. I listened. The second ticked past. Nothing filled it. No chime, no knock, no voice through a door saying it heard me earlier. Then the rain sound swelled back up, and a car passed on the road below, and someone upstairs coughed, and the illusion of normal apartment noise reassembled itself like a scaffold around me. But that second had already done its work. From then on, I heard it every time. I could be rinsing a plate, scrolling my phone, zoning out to a game, thinking about absolutely nothing, and the moment the machines aligned in their off cycle, my brain would snap to alert. Lightning would flash, painting the balcony door in white streaks. The neighboring apartment windows would glow like little fish tanks in the wet dark. Power lines would buzz faintly under the charged air, and inside, for that one stretched tick of silence, I would find myself holding my breath, waiting for a sound that belonged to a different house entirely. Waiting, without wanting to, for a chime that should not work. 7:03, the 1 second, tonight. Right now, as I am typing this, I am back in a small, cheap kitchen. Different address, different building. Same bad hour. The laminate under my elbows is fake wood grain, peeling a little at the edges. The chair I'm sitting on wobbles if I lean too far to the left. My laptop hums quietly in front of me, screen glow throwing a pale rectangle across the table and up into my face. The clock on the microwave over my shoulder says 12:23 a.m. Outside my second-floor window, the storm that had been flirting with the city all evening finally committed an hour ago. Rain has been hitting the glass in steady waves, harder now, blown sideways by gusts that rattle the balcony railing. Every few minutes, lightning flares white behind the blinds, turning the whole apartment into an overexposed photograph for half a second. The AC unit under the living room window has been humming low, struggling like it is running through wet cotton. It sends a steady vibration through the wall that I can feel in the table. The fridge buzzes just loud enough to be noticeable, just soft enough that my brain files it under normal. Above me, my upstairs neighbor has been walking around. Slow, sleepy footfalls, the occasional trip to the bathroom, pipes in the wall knocking in sympathy. Their TV had been murmuring earlier. By now, it is down to the dull, bluish flicker leaking around the edge of their curtain when the lightning allows. On the screen in front of me, the word "count" at the bottom of the document keeps ticking upward. My hands move, telling you all of this, wrapping that one night in the little ranch house in more words than it probably deserves. I am writing it the way people send stories to channels like the one you are listening to now. Not because I think anyone is going to solve anything for me. Not because I am asking whether it was a ghost or a glitch or some elaborate, meaningless coincidence. I am writing it because I want there to be a record somewhere that on one August night, a man came to my door already counting on the fact that I was there. The police never called me back with anything more useful than a case number. Weeks went by, then months, and there was never a follow-up about anyone matching his vague description getting picked up for anything along my stretch of county. If he did this to other people, either they never reported it, or their reports never crossed my path. I never heard his voice again in real life. I heard him in my head. Plenty. In every paused breath at the end of a long day, in every night my neighbor's TV clicked off and left me staring at the ceiling, in every visit to a friend's place where a doorbell chimed and my body flinched before my brain caught up. The way he said, "Hey man," the way he threaded, "I know you're home" through my walls, the stupid casual tone of, "You gaming in here, huh?" Those got stuck somewhere in the part of my brain that is supposed to handle normal human contact. Now I live up here instead of down there. I have reinforced locks, a cheap security bar under the front doorknob, shoes lined up neatly by the entrance like I am expecting a fire drill at any moment. I keep my phone charged and within reach. I have rehearsed that stupid roll under the door move in my head 100 times, even though there is no garage here, no half-open escape hatch. The Ring doorbell that failed me sits in the bottom of a cardboard box in my closet, tangled in old HDMI cables and a dead controller. I never installed it on this place. The buzzer system in the lobby is bad enough, just a rough buzz and a crackling voice on the intercom. No pleasant chime. Nothing that sounds like it belongs in a commercial. Outside, thunder rolls in closer now, the sound crawling along the building frame. The blinds over the sliding balcony door tremble when the wind leans against the glass. Somewhere on the street below, a car hits a puddle, water spraying up and slapping against bumper and curb. I type another sentence, then another. The story arcs toward where you already know it is going. I tell you, I do not watch storms the way I used to. I tell you, I still notice the gap between machine noises, the second where everything in the building lines up and shuts off at once. I tell you that, for the most part, life went on. I kept going to work. I paid rent. I learned the names of my new neighbors, or at least their routines. I ordered takeout, and I flinched a bit less each time someone knocked. As I write that, the AC under the window hums, steady. The The fridge buzzes. The pipes somewhere above hiss as someone runs water. The storm lays a constant sheet of noise over everything. And then, without warning, the apartment does the thing I have been describing to you for the last several pages. The AC cuts off mid-hum with a hollow clunk. The fridge compressor stops like someone pulled its plug. Upstairs, the muffled TV flicker goes silent. Or maybe it had already been silent, and I only now notice the absence. Even the storm chooses that moment to take a small breath, the rain thinning just enough that its hiss drops a notch. For one single second, my apartment is absolutely, unnaturally quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring with the sudden lack of background. The kind of quiet that feels like a blank line drawn through everything. In that 1 second, from behind me, from the direction of my apartment door, the same cheap slab with no camera, no chime unit, nothing installed but the standard buzzer downstairs. I hear it. Soft, perfect, two-tone. The exact ring chime from my old house. Not muffled through a wall, not distorted like it is coming from someone's TV. Crisp and clear, like there is a little white speaker plugged into an outlet by my hallway, and it has just been triggered by motion at a door I do not have anymore. Ding ding. My fingers freeze above the keyboard. The cursor on the laptop screen blinks in the blank space after the last sentence, waiting. The glow from the screen suddenly feels like a spotlight aimed at the back of my head, announcing to whatever is behind me that yes, I am awake. Yes, I am here. Yes, I heard that. I do not turn around. Every instinct I have tries to twist my spine, pull my shoulders. My eyes want to go to the dark rectangle of the hallway, to the faint line of light under the base of the door. I stare at the screen instead and watch the clock in the corner roll over from 12:23 to 12:24. I take in a slow breath, pretending it was nothing. A neighbor dropping something, a TV in another unit, a sound from memory crashing into the present hard enough that my brain misfiled it as real. That is the story I will tell myself in the morning if I want to sleep again. Right now, my skin crawls like it did in the laundry room. Every hair on my arms is standing up, my heart hammering against my ribs in a rhythm that feels too loud in the renewed silence. Then the moment breaks. The AC kicks back in with its usual groan, rattling the thin wall. The fridge hum returns, low and insistent. Water moves in the pipes somewhere above as someone flushes a toilet. The storm finds its volume again, rain thickening against the glass, thunder muttering over the rooftops. House noise, apartment noise, normal noise pours back in, filling the gap like nothing happened. On the screen, the cursor still blinks at the end of the paragraph, where I was about to talk about you. So I do. I type one more line, addressed to whoever is listening to this now. In your car parked under a sodium orange streetlight with the engine ticking as it cools. In your bed with your own AC humming. On your couch with your fridge cycling on and off in the next room. I am not telling you to move. I am not telling you to never enjoy thunderstorms again, or to wire your place up like a bank vault, or to start jumping at every person who knocks. I am just saying this. If you ever find yourself standing behind a door, tempted to answer a stranger with your voice instead of silence, just remember that some people do not knock to find out if anyone is home. They knock because they already know someone is there, and they are just listening for what you sound like when you are afraid. The last line I hear, right before I would hit send on this, is not spoken aloud. It is a memory, timed too perfectly with the next thunderclap to feel like coincidence. The words threading themselves across the top of the storm in my head in that same rough, amused voice. I know you're home. I heard you. And whether or not you believe any of this, whether you think it was a man or a glitch or just trauma looping on itself, does not really matter. Because that 1 second of silence, and whatever you hear in it, can happen anywhere, including the room you are in right now.